right, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Bread Beckers. I am Sue Becker, one of the owners and founders here at Bread Beckers. I just want to welcome you today to the food dehydration class. It's one of my most fun classes to do. I really enjoy food dehydration and sharing with you some fun ways to preserve food. Before we get started, though, I just want to read something to you. This morning, I was reading a hymn, an old hymn. The lady that leads praise and worship, she always sends me the music that we're going to do on Sunday morning. So I try to read it and get ready. And man, I don't know that I've ever really listened to the words so well to the Ode to Joy. So I want to start the morning with that. Joyful, joyful, we adore you, God of glory, God of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before you, opening the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. Have y'all noticed these words? When you sing it, it kind of loses something. And then it goes on. All your works with joy surround you. Earth and heaven reflect your rays. Stars and angels sing around you. I'm getting goosebumps just reading these. Center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain praise you eternally. Always giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest. Loving Father, Christ our brother, let your light upon us shine. Teach us how to love each other. Lift us to the joy divine. Mortals join the mighty chorus, which the morning stars began. God's own love is reigning over us, joining people hand in hand. Ever singing, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us sunward in the triumph song of life. He wrote this during wartime, and it was a real blessing to the people to encourage them. Let's pray before we get started. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your amazing creation. We thank you for the food that you've given us to nourish our bodies. We ask you to forgive us for altering your perfect provision and then wondering why we're sick. So, Lord, give us wisdom. Show us how to come back to your ways of living, being, eating, doing, sharing, loving, Lord, so that we might truly be light in this dark world. Thank you for this time. I pray a blessing on each family and person represented here, God. Redeem this time and just encourage us in your word. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Welcome to food dehydration. Dehydration is the oldest method of food preservation. Long before there were these wonderful dehydrators, electric dehydrators, there were solar dehydrators, and not the fancy kind that you can now build and use solar energy. Nope, it was the sunshine, and they dried it out sometimes on the rooftops and things like that. So there are many advantages to dehydrating food, and we're going to learn some of those today, and just some of the wonderful foods that you can dehydrate. Nutritionally, about 97% of your nutrients are retained in dehydration, as opposed to about 60% in freezing, and canning, it's only about 40% because you're going to lose some of those enzymes and vital nutrients to the high heat of that preservation. With only the water removed, foods dried at lower temperatures will even keep their enzymes intact. Some foods it's safe to dry at 105 degrees. It may take a day, 24 hours, but who cares as long as you're still saving those vital enzymes. Now, meat and things like that, of course, you're going to have to dry at a higher temperature, but that's okay. Flavors are enhanced because the flavors are concentrated. You've removed just the water. So instead of putting water in the jar or blanching them and kind of diluting those flavors, you're increasing all of those flavors. And any food that contains natural sugars becomes even sweeter dehydrated. If you've ever tasted we're going to taste some pineapple and grapes and apples today, and you're going to see just how wonderful it is. And dehydrated foods nutritionally, they actually make a wonderful, healthy snack. If your kids like to snack on things, it makes a nice snack for road trips, backpacks, or whatever, lunches, and it's lightweight. In fact, I was glad I was doing this class today because I did a little extra than I normally do, because it'll go in our backpacks that we'll be going to Tanzania, because it's a 16-hour flight, so who knows where we'll eat or what we'll eat. And even after we get there, the beef jerky might be a very nice thing to have on hand. So we're real excited about that. Preparation. Oh my goodness, guys. Dehydration is so easy. Really, 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 all you need is a good knife, a cutting board, a box grater, or some type of slicer, shredder attachment if you have a good mixer, and of course then the mandolin slicer that we'll feature, and I'll show you how to use it, and that is one of the best mandolin slicers that I've ever seen. So really, it's easy to prepare. Kids can help you. I haven't told you my dehydration story. I'll tell you that in a minute. I usually begin with that story, and I forgot. I was so overwhelmed by the ode to joy. But so basically, slice, grate, chop, spread it out, put it in the dehydrator, and turn it on. So years ago, when we gardened much more than we do now, we had, Brad decided to plant a few tomato plants, 100 to be exact. Yeah, so every 2 days, we collected a wheat bucket full, 6-gallon, 3 wheat buckets full, pardon me. So we learned to dehydrate that year, and it was great. My kids didn't think so, but I thought it was wonderful. So the boys would go down and pick the tomatoes while we cleaned out the dehydrator from the tomatoes from 2 days before. And so then we come up, we'd wash, and Brad used the mandolin, and he sliced. The kids sat around our table. I didn't tell you I have 9 children. Well, I only had 7 then, but I have 9 now. But anyway, we adopted 2. I didn't have children. I'm not Sarah. Did not have them in my old age. But anyway, so so we'd sit around the table, and they'd each had their tray in front of them, and he'd pass the tomatoes out, and they'd spread them out, and then we'd fill the dehydrator. And we ended up with 4 dehydrators because they were kind of small, the ones I started with. And then they would take 24, 48 hours to dry. So 2 days later, we cleaned out those dried tomatoes while the boys picked the new tomatoes, and the process started again. Some of my kids hate tomatoes to this day, but oh well, it's okay. They'll come around. But anyway, yeah, and that's the thing about dehydration, which I'm going to get to, an advantage over canning to freezing. We ended up, I learned to powder, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So we dry those tomatoes, and then I would powder them. And the powder for tomatoes, 100 tomatoes in a quart jar. The powder equivalent to 100 tomatoes. Then if I wanted tomato sauce or tomato paste, all I had to do was rehydrate it with water. So much less space than canning all of those tomatoes and sauce, which I still love to do some of that. There's still a place where you want canned tomatoes or canned tomato sauce already on hand. But that's one of the other advantages of dehydration, is it doesn't take up a lot of space. It doesn't really even take a lot of special equipment to store it. A lot of times for me, it's a Ziploc bag. Might be a jar if that's something that I'm using right out of, right away. So what I do when I store my food, I have, how many of y'all have some of these around? Yeah. So I have one labeled veggies and one labeled fruit. I have a gamma lid on it. So here's some spinach. Here's some rice. Here's some zucchini and apples. Here's some yellow squash. It's been in here a while, but you can do yellow squash here. And so this is just a way you can put it, kind of just throw it in a Ziploc bag, put it in a bucket so it doesn't collect a whole lot of moisture, and then just store it. And I have one for veggies and one for fruit so that those flavors don't meld too much, because those Ziploc bags do breathe. All right, let me catch my timer here real quick. I think my bread is ready, and I don't want to burn it. Yep. Still not done. I should have believed the thing said 45 to 50 minutes, and I didn't think it took that long. But anyway, so that's the wonderful advantage of dehydration. And you can see that's a whole bucket full of all kinds of vegetables and fruits and fruit leathers and fruit roll-ups and apples and grapes. and they're just in a 6-gallon bucket. It's a bunch of food in there. So your kids can help do this, unlike canning where you really don't want anybody else around in the kitchen, and the heat of the canner and everything is kind of, that's a lot in the summertime. Versatility, dried foods can be used all kinds of ways. You can throw a handful of dried carrots or onions or whatever, like this is my soup mix. And just to give you an idea, that is 1 onion, 2 carrots, and 2 stalks of celery. Dehydrated. And now all I need to do is throw this in a pot of soup and it'll rehydrate. And it's ready to go. So, you know, when things are on sale or when you have a day off, chop and slice and grate and whatever and dehydrate it, and then all you have to do is grab a handful and throw it in the dehydrator. And so this is grated zucchini. This is pumpkin. How many of y'all buy pumpkin in the fall and you freeze it? Which I like frozen pumpkin too, or canned pumpkin or whatever. But the problem is you've got to have a freezer. You got to run that freezer. If you lose power, you lose your frozen food. Not so with dehydration. So this is pumpkin powder. I just cooked the pumpkin, spread it out on a sheet, dry, and then pureed it, spread it out on a sheet and dried it, and then powdered it. And now 1/8 of a cup, rehydrate it with water and just let it sit till it gets nice and creamy like you want it. And 1/8 of a cup of this powder is equal to 1 cup of mashed cooked pumpkin. So it's space saving, believe me, it's just so nice. And there's so many other things that you can do. We have a great book on dehydration. It's called the Dehydrator Bible. And I've really enjoyed using this book here recently. In the front of the book is all kinds of instructions for dehydrating. But honestly, you're going to see you don't need a lot of instructions. And I don't blanch. A lot of people do blanch some of their things before they dehydrate. I don't. Even green beans, I've just done them just fresh. So it'll tell you different things that you can dehydrate, which there's not a lot. I don't like to dehydrate. I will tell you I don't love to dehydrate blueberries. They just take forever, and they're just kind of gritty and seedy, and so I still freeze my blueberries. But then what I love about this book, it gives you all these recipes. The rest of the book is recipes to use with this dehydrated food. So I got a little creative this week and decided to try some brown rice. So I fully cooked the rice, spread the rice out in the dehydrator and dehydrated it, and then I just let it soak about 20 minutes and then let it simmer about 5, and it was ready to eat instead of the hour cooking time. So these are some fun things that you can do with your dehydrated food. And like I said, backpacking and traveling. I'll tell you a story years ago when we first started dehydrating, and I was doing grapes and apples and oranges and beef jerky and all kinds of foods like that because my kids love to snack on those. And we did a caravan trip to Colorado with 3 other families, I think it was. And anyway, it was 2 or 3 day drive out there. And they would stop and they would get chips and drinks. And of course, their kids would then be hungry again, and their car was a mess. So we had the van with all of our kids in it. I think I was pregnant with my 6th child at the time. And we had beef jerky, apples, pineapple, grapes, dried. And so our kids were snacking on that. They didn't get hungry again. There weren't crummy messes in the car. They weren't thirsty. They were satisfied. And we hit Kansas. Have any of y'all ever driven through Kansas? It's like forever, and you think there's a city ahead, and you go, okay, we'll make a bathroom stop there, and you get there, and it's a grain elevator. It's not a city at all. It was, and so it's flat, and my daughter just had her learner's permit, so we were letting her drive. And it was so funny. One of the cars, we swapped around kids sometimes. And so some of my kids were over in the other car. And they pulled up beside us and rolled down the window and said, "Throw us the beef jerky." So we had to toss the beef jerky over to them, and hopefully they would catch it. But anyway, all right, one more trip. Let me get my bread here. All right. So this is we're going to make this in class, but this is an apple, carrot, zucchini bread. I call it my garden harvest bread. All right. So very, very versatile. Great to, like I said, to give your kids a little bit healthier snack than the traditional snacky foods that you do. So just easy, space saver, time saver, energy saver, easy to do. So you're going to see just how easy that is. So I'm going to tell you a little story about me, and then we'll get started with actually dehydrating some of this food. So in 1991, I was introduced to the whole concept of milling my own grain and making my own bread from freshly milled flour and all the health benefits surrounding it. As a food scientist, it made absolute sense to me, and we brought that mill into our home. And I can tell you now, white flour, white bread's not been in our house since 1991. We make everything from freshly milled flour. And the health of our family changed so drastically. I began to make bread for other people and share what it had done for us. The next thing I knew, people were coming to me going, my cholesterol dropped 85 points in a month, and all I've changed is eating your bread, and I've been trying for years and nothing's happened. Or people would come and say, okay, I feel really good, or I pooped today. That's a big one. And so they wanted to learn how to make bread. So they came to me one by one and said, well, where can I get a mill, and will you teach me how to make bread? And so I remember this day very clearly. It was in the fall of 1992, and Brad came home from work, and I homeschooled my children, so I did that, made all the bread for my family, and was now making bread for others. I had literally been baking all day long, and I was worn out. And something hit me. I think a great revelation from the Lord hit me that day. And I'll never forget, I met Brad. I heard him drive up, and I met him in the driveway. And I just looked at him, and I said, I don't think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world how to make bread for themselves. Little did I know how prophetic I was saying then, as we now go all over the world teaching people how to make bread. But so he was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So I said, I want to sell a grain mill, and I want to teach people how to make bread. So we contacted the company where we had gotten our grain mill, talked to them about becoming a distributor and starting a business, and a legitimate business and everything. And they said, that's great. Here's our requirements. We don't really have a minimum order, except we want you to own one of each of the appliances that we carry. The mill was one. I'm like, great, got that. The mixer, when they told me how big it was, because I was using a smaller mixer at the time, I was like, yeah, how fast can you get that here? And I was great with that. A food dehydrator. And I was like, I'm not interested in a dehydrator. Literally, I'm talking to this guy on the phone about starting a business. I'm like, I don't want a dehydrator. And he's like, well, it's one of the appliances we sell, and to send people to you, we want you to know about our products. And I'm like, well, I just don't want a dehydrator. And I don't know why I was so argumentative, but I was. And I just said, only hippies dehydrate. That's what I said. So y'all are all hippies now, I guess. Or food preppers. I said, weird people dehydrate food. And I just don't want it. And finally, after we talked a little more and he learned some of my background and making bread and everything, he said, Sue, buy the dehydrator. Sell it if you want. I don't care, but just buy it. That's our prerequisite. I was like, okay, send me the dehydrator. So it gets here, and I thought, okay, I'll try it. Within a few months, we owned 4 of those dehydrators. And like I said, we were gardeners. We were dehydrating tomatoes. And because I thought, oh, dried apples, dried pineapple. Oh, no. We were drying all kinds of things from our garden. And I ended up actually making a food dehydrator video for the company. So there you go. That's my food dehydrator story. You may think, oh, okay, well, you're here, so you probably aren't as opposed to it as I was. But there's so many great things you can do. So cucumbers are one of the most prolific garden vegetables, it is a vegetable, yep. So easy to dehydrate. How are we going to use that? I'm going to show you in just a little bit. So that's one of the things we use. Zucchini, that's the most prolific, right? You're trying to give it all to your neighbors and everybody you can think of. Now you've got tons. I'm going to show you tons of ways to use it. Just grating it plain or mixing it with apple carrots and zucchini to make your grated zucchini, or just grating it to have on hand. Why do I like grated zucchini dried as opposed to in the freezer? You ever grated zucchini in the summer and frozen it to use in the winter for zucchini bread? What happens when you take it out of the freezer? It's this watery, mushy mess, right? And we bake and cook whenever we go on vacation, if it's, you know, where we can drive and take our meal and everything. So it's great. You can take a bag of grated zucchini instead of a frozen bag that's going to melt all in your cooler before you even get there. So it's just easy to take on trips and throw in food and just use it anywhere. And then one of my favorites that I've learned how to do recently, and somebody said they didn't like kale, and I'm not a big kale fan either, actually, but these are very, very delicious kale chips. So I'm going to show you how to do those. I'm going to set these here for you guys. Are going to sample these in a little bit. And then, of course, beef jerky. Who doesn't want to do beef jerky? So I'm going to show you how to make some delicious beef jerky. And this is just one of the suggestions of flavors. I kind of tweaked several recipes until I got the flavor I wanted. Some were too sweet, some were too salty, some were weird. And so anyway, so that's beef jerky. The rest of that's going with us. And then apples and apple powder. I kid you not. Learning to powder your dried food will change your life. It will change the way you look at everything. So this is my dried apples. These are cinnamon apples. You're going to sample some of these shortly. Once you get them really, really dry, you can powder them, and I use this and sprinkle it on my oatmeal. No reason to buy the packets of apple cinnamon oatmeal. You've got your dried apples. You can put it right in, right at the end, or sprinkle it on top if some kids don't like, you know, dried apples, so, or dried fruit in their oatmeal. But that's just a great way. You can sprinkle it inside of bread. It's delicious. And so you just have it already. So you're not grating apples or having to pull out, you know, different apparatuses and tools to get your product there. So this is also cucumbers that I sliced. This is my dehydrated rice, fully cooked brown rice, which is what minute rice is. It's fully cooked, dehydrated, so then really all you have to do is just rehydrate it, let it soak, and then just it'll cook up in a few minutes. So that's a nice thing. I've already shown you the pumpkin powder. This is some grated zucchini. This has been around for a couple of years. It may turn a little dark, but it's still perfectly fine. No mold or bacteria will grow on foods because there's no water there. So as long as you get things really dry, then there was relatively no spoilage. Now your beef jerky and things that have oil and fats in them, those will go rancid just like any other food that has oil. So coconut, I can't think of beef jerky, anything that has oil. I used to put, I'm going to show you how to make these delicious zucchini chips. I used to spritz them with oil so the seasoning would stick to them a little bit better, but then I realized that then they didn't have as long a shelf life. So I just quit doing that, and they're actually just as delicious. So there's my soup mix. Great, great, great to have on hand. This is a great Christmas gift. You know, just get your kitchen and do an onion, 2 carrots, 2 celery, and it looks dark, which it does turn dark a little bit, the potatoes particularly, but if you put this in a tomato-based soup mix or some kind of acid, which is basically what we do a lot of times with carrots, onions, celery, it'll brighten back up and it won't be grayish looking in there. So that's just a great thing. But what about doing that and filling some quart jars with soup mixes and dehydrated zucchini, and do it now in the summer and you've got Christmas gifts already ready. So those are some great ideas. This is spinach powder. Dry your spinach. It only takes a couple of hours to dry those handfuls of spinach, and then powder it once it's dry. A tablespoon of this powder is equivalent to a cup of fresh spinach. How many of y'all do green smoothies? How many of you buy big tubs of greens like this, and before you finish it all, and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that? Well, so now buy it, take half of it, dehydrate it, and then use the other half fresh if you want, or dry it all, whatever. And then you've got it, and you don't lose the spoilage to it sitting in the refrigerator. All right, and then so that's our spinach powder. We're going to make a smoothie with that later, but you can throw it in if you're cooking rice or any kind of spinach pasta or whatever. Also, you can add it to your pasta dough to make your spinach powder. Your spinach pasta the same with tomato. Oranges, I dehydrate them, the whole orange. Some of these I ate the oranges, but I didn't. Don't waste anything. So go ahead and even the rinds, dry those. But these are my oranges. Just dry the whole orange. Sometimes I get just craving orange things, orange biscuits, orange bread, orange this, orange that, and I don't have oranges on hand. This way I have it, powder it, and that's like instant orange zest. So there you have it. All right. And that's what I made the orange biscuits and the orange butter from. Just powdered up these oranges and tossed it in my biscuit dough. Grapes, raisins, but these are delicious. To me, green grapes, I don't like green grapes fresh. They're too tart for me, but to me, these remind me of the lemon drops my grandfather used to buy, because when you bite into them, they're sweet at first, and then when you crunch into them, they're tart and sour. Banana chips, of course, and you can make them as dry, or you can leave them a little soft if you want. You're going to taste those in a little bit. Fresh pineapple. This is still a little sticky, but it's perfectly fine, and it is delicious. I like to just throw the pineapple and the banana in there together. It tastes like a pina colada, but without the alcohol. So anyway, and then this is fruit leathers. How many of y'all spend tons of money on fruit leathers for your kids? Yeah, and if you've read the instructions, the ingredients, not a lot of fruit there, and all kinds of sugary and oftentimes colors and everything like that. So there you go. Yes? I've never dehydrated seafood. The only foods I have dehydrated, or only meat, has been beef jerky, but I've not done seafood. I think there are some directions in the dehydration book here. And it's funny, most people didn't realize, because remember that first year I started selling meals, I had this dehydrator, and I actually, in the back of our recipe collection, is some dehydration recipes. Just a few here, just a few ideas. But I'm telling you, once you get started, you go, whoa, I can do this, because it's just cut it, grate it, whatever. And if you peel a fruit or a vegetable to eat it, then you want to peel it to dehydrate it. If it's yellow squash that you want to dehydrate to make squash casserole, cut it the size that you would cut it to use fresh. It will shrink up, but when you rehydrate it, it'll come back up to size. Does that make sense? So those are just some great dehydration tips. And now we are going to get on with dehydration. I'm about to. So see, these are just some of my little, like the apples, you'll see, I don't throw anything away, because even that little end piece there that's mostly skin that nobody's going to want to eat, that is an apple crisp. We're going to powder it in just a little while, and I'll show you how to do that. And there's a baggie of apple powder. So don't throw anything away. Save it all, dehydrate it, use it for something. So let me bring up the dehydrator. I'm going to talk about the dehydrator that I love, the Excalibur, and then I'm going to move it back to the back so it's not so cumbersome for me to put the trays in, but I'll talk about it now. So this is the Excalibur dehydrator. It is by far one of the best dehydrators on the market. Most people that really dehydrate food, a lot of raw foodies, this is the dehydrator they're going to tell you that they love. The Excalibur has a variable temperature setting from 105, which you can go down to do your vegetables and your fruits so that you're saving those enzymes. So it is a raw food dehydrator, up to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so you can, dry all kinds of things. And it has your temperature chart here. Jerky, you're going to have to dry at 155 degrees to be safe, because this is raw meat that you're drying. But your herbs, your living foods, you don't want to go over 105. But also you can use your dehydrator. If you cover your rising dough, you can use it as a proofer because it's right at 110 degrees. It's perfect for that. Also yogurt making. You can take out the trays and put your jars of yogurt, or I'm going to show you how to do yogurt in the fermentation class in July. And I incubated milk kefir yesterday, and it was perfect this morning. So this is the Excalibur, the little tray. The door just kind of slides or just comes off. And then it's 9 full trays, 15 square feet of drying space. It comes with this mesh, that's it, mesh insert. All of this is BPA free, so it's not anything that's going to hurt your foods or, leach into your foods. I need to find all of these. I don't know where they are, if they're all in here. These are the Flex Sheets by Excalibur. They do not come with the dehydrator, and they are a little pricey. I think they're $8 or $9 a sheet. But I'm going to tell you something. They're worth their weight in gold. They're worth every penny to use them. I use them for everything because when you dehydrate food, you're sucking the water out, and it's going to suck down and stick to this mesh. And then especially delicate things like tomatoes, like spinach, and that it's almost impossible to get off of this mesh. So even though this is billed to use with very liquidy things or fine things like coconut, thank you. I use it for everything because you'll see, like here's my fruit leather. Well, you wouldn't use it. You would have to use it with a fruit leather, but other foods you just, it's stuck again because I left it here overnight. So you just peel it up. You have to get it started there. But you'll see that fruit leather just comes right up. Okay? Of course, like I said, you have to use it with the fruit leather, but that's the way other vegetables and spinach and tomatoes, they all just come right up, your beef jerky. I did it once on the mesh trays. We did the tomatoes, and we had to scrape them and scrape them and scrape them off of the mesh because they stuck. So that's your fruit leather. Just comes right up, and there you have it. So I highly recommend the mesh trays, even if you only say start with 4 or 5, but if you're going to garden a lot, you're going to want a tray for you're going to want a flex sheet for every tray. So that's the Excalibur. Let me tell you something about the Excalibur. This is I can't remember the model number, but they've discontinued this model number, and the only difference in this and the new one is the warranty, and the price. Okay, so we have about 6 of these left at the older price, which is $219.95. Once those 6 are sold, the other 14 that we have are $279, I believe it is $279. So quite a bit of difference there. So just telling you that. And that is really, I looked at the specs, I looked at the weight, everything is exactly the same. They just changed it from a 7-year warranty to a 10-year warranty. So you're paying for that 10-year warranty. So there you have it. But I've had this dehydrator for, I'm not sure how many years now, a long time. 2900, and the new one is 3900, yes. So, it has a 7-inch fan in the back, and it's 600 watts. And the thing I love about, or one of the things I love about the Excalibur is the big flat trays. Unlike the dehydrators that have the fans that blow up in the bottom and you stack the trays like that, your air only comes up through those trays. So if you really fill them, you don't get a lot of airflow in those top trays. Whereas this, the fan is in the back and it blows out over every tray equally. I don't ever have to shift my trays around. If I have to dry another hour, maybe, but who cares? It only costs about 8 cents an hour to run the dehydrator. So to me, it's easier to just stick it in there. If I have to fool with something a lot, it's no longer convenient and easy to do. So that's what I love about the Excalibur. That powerful fan blows that warm air from the back over all the trays evenly. So that's it on the Excalibur. You can do as many trays or as little trays as you want. And like I said, it's 15 square feet of drying space, and I love that I'm not having to fight around a hole, you know, being able to do the big fruit leather instead of having some extra little tiny trays there to do that fruit leather. And then you can take trays out and use it, like I said, as a yogurt incubator or a bread proofer or whatever, so you can put a bowl or jars in there. So that's the Excalibur. Any questions on the Excalibur? Okay, so this is, I started with another dehydrator that had the little, fan in the bottom that blew up through the trays. And in 2007, we had a guest teacher come in and teach a raw foods class. And she's like, Sue, you've got to get the Excalibur. And I was like, well, I'm fine with this. Once I used the Excalibur and had those nice big trays to work with and just could spread out so much at one time on those and do as much or as little as I wanted to do, it made all the difference in the world. And so this is by far the best dehydrator out there. All right, I'm going to shift it to the back. There is a model that we don't carry. This does not have a timer that turns off. And to be honest with you, I rarely need a timer. Every now and then there's like beef jerky. It wasn't quite ready before I left to go home. So then if I do it overnight, it's going to be too hard the next morning. So there's every now and then, but that's because I'm working. If I were home, it could have gone another hour and it would have been fine. So what I do in those instances, I just turn the heat down so that it'll just dry much more slowly. To me, it's not worth $50 more or something like that. It's for a timer. I've never really needed a timer. Also, you don't really, particularly if you're going to powder that dry food, you don't really want that dehydrator turning off and sitting there without getting that food put in a jar or a baggie, because if it just sits there, the warmth in the dehydrator is going to start reabsorbing moisture and moisture in the air, especially if it's rainy or whatever. And you can dry things outside. It doesn't bother it to do that. It'll still dehydrate even if it's rainy or whatever. In fact, there's some things you want to dry outside. This is our dehydrated Vidalia onions. Should have put it in a clearer bag so you could see. These Brad and I dried in 1998. And they're still good. They're still quite fragrant. But we went to, my family lives in South Georgia, real near Vidalia. And we went down there to visit, and we came home with a 50-pound bag of Vidalia onions. And we dehydrated them, because that was when I had decided to dehydrate just about everything. And it's a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon with your husband with no children in the house, because I had laid down to take a nap. The kids were all in their room. Brad decided he would start slicing the onions, 50-pound bag, using the slicer attachment to the Anchus room. The next thing I know, even with my door closed, I was like, what is going on? Why are my eyes burning so much? And the next thing I know, here, all the kids coming out of their room going, what's happening? Something's burning our eyes. And they go in the kitchen, and there's Brad slicing those Vidalia onions. So one of my ingenious sons goes down and gets the ski goggles, because we were a skiing family. So there are Brad and I in the kitchen slicing Vidalia onions with ski mask on, and our kids are all under the carport. The only downside is they kept knocking on the door, are y'all almost done? And because they wouldn't come in. So we told them, go jump on the trampoline, go away, go away. And so we just took our time and sliced up all the onions. And so we had those 4 dehydrators full, and of course, if you can imagine how strong they were slicing, can you imagine if that fan starts blowing and that air starts circulating? And so we put them out all under the carport to dry on tables. And this was back when Brad did construction, and he had an old Ford pickup truck with no air conditioning, and he would drive home from Atlanta with the windows down, okay? And when you turn off the highway to come up to our house, there's a little 1/4-mile road to get to our road, and then you turn on our road, and we're the first house. You can see it from the highway, but it's about a 1/4 mile up to our road. He said when he turned on that road, he could smell the onions from there. So you might attract some critters and neighbors going, holy cow, y'all have the county fair here, or what's going on? So anyway, just kind of funny. Oregano, you want to dry outside. Herbs, things like that. Just put them in the dehydrator and put outside. When I say herbs, your more volatile ones like your oregano. I don't think thyme is so volatile, but oregano definitely, because I dried it one time inside, and it was the next thing I know, I was like, I can't breathe, something's going on. So anyway, all right, so let's start by showing you how easy it is to dry foods. Why I also like the Excaliburs, it's a flat tray, sits right on the counter, and a lot of times I can just grate or slice or whatever right onto the tray and just spread it out. Like I said earlier, cucumbers are one of the most prolific, I think, from our garden, and can only pickle so much and eat so many, and the next thing you know, you're like, somebody take some. So I learned to dehydrate them, and again, great tool, a ceramic knife, a good sharp knife. I love my ceramic knives. They're sharper than any steel knife, and Brad keeps our knives pretty sharp, but I'll go, okay, I'll use this, and I go, nope, I'm getting my ceramic knife. I actually put a sample of a ceramic knife over here with a cutting board. You're welcome to try some oranges and just feel how it slices. Women especially like it because it's so lightweight. Okay, so I just slice the ends off of my cucumbers. Another great thing about dehydrating is you usually can save and dehydrate even the ends and the slices, but I don't do so much with my cucumbers. But I love my little compost jar here, and it's got a charcoal filter so you don't get the smell. It's got a little gasket here that seals tightly. So throw all your scraps in your compost jar, and then it'll go right back into your garden. So nothing is wasted. So this is our, Queasy Pro box grater. It's just a great box grater. It's actually sharpened edges here instead of just stamped. And I just grate right onto my food, my dehydrator tray. Now, if I were going to make vegetable chips out of these, which I'm going to show you how I make my zucchini chips, you can do the very same thing with your cucumber. So I would slice it with my Mandolin slicer. But this way, I don't care. I'm going to powder this cucumber, so I don't care what it looks like. And I get down to that little nub, and I just leave it. It'll dry too. Cucumber's got a lot of liquid in them, so if you were putting these on the mesh tray, it would tend to drip through a little bit before it starts getting dehydrated, but then also dehydration sucks all that water out, and it would just stick to the mesh tray. So that's why I love these flex sheets. And yes, they are an investment, but these I got in 2007. You don't wear them out, you know, and you can wash them up real easily. And then I just stick them back on my dehydrator tray, turn it on a few minutes, and let them dry. So I'm just going to spread my cucumbers out. See the liquid that's already coming out of them? And drying times, let's talk about drying times. The Excalibur does come with a dehydration guide booklet that'll give you some basic drying times. But again, those are kind of basic. It's going to depend how much moisture is in that fruit or vegetable that you're drying, because that varies from cucumber to cucumber, from variety to variety, or apple to apple, tomato to tomato. And then also how thick or how thin or how grated and how much you stack it on there. I do try to give it some good air around it instead of piling it up high so that all of it gets dry. So there's my grated cucumber, and I'm just going to stick it in my dehydrator. So what do I do, excuse me, with grated cucumber? So here's the grated cucumber that I grated and dried for the class. Here's what I mean by powdering. And I discovered this. I love cucumber, but like I said, you can only do so many pickles and eat so many in your salad or whatever. So when we started powdering the tomato, I was like, wonder if I could just powder the cucumber All right, and you're like, okay, that's great. What are you going to do with powdered cucumber? Well, let's see, I'm going to use the bigger one. You need a blender. Bigger blender if you're going to do a lot at one time, but with just this little bit of cucumber, you can just pour it in here. And typically I like to powder it right, like when you take food out of the dehydrate, it's a little bit warm. Let it just come to room temperature, okay? You don't want to let it sit a long time if you're going to, especially if you're going to powder it, and you want to dry it till it's crispy and really dry. And so typically I go ahead and powder it once it's dry instead of storing it and then powdering it later. But I wanted to show you. So that's what I mean by powdering. So you can use just a little mini blender, or if you have a lot, then a bigger blender would do better. Or if you have a food processor. Now see, this was kind of wet because I had taken it out and let it sit in the jar, so it's not as powdery as this is what it typically looks like. It's more powdery like that. So what do I do with this cucumber powder? You're going to taste it. This is a creamy cucumber dip that's just drained yogurt. I used our yogurt cheese drainer. Drained some yogurt so it was thick like sour cream. Added a little mayonnaise for the saltiness. And then just a little bit of garlic salt, our Redmond garlic salt. And then 2 or 3 tablespoons of the cucumber powder, which is about 1.5 cucumbers. Okay, so instead of having to grate that cucumber right then, I had the powder. And so I just dumped it in here. It's best if it can meld because there's no MSG, no flavor enhancers or anything like that. So I wanted to make it yesterday. So now you're going to just enjoy this creamy cucumber dip. And those cucumbers that I made this with were actually dried about 6 months ago and powdered. So you can see, though, what it's going to taste like. It just tastes like you just picked those cucumbers out of your garden. The freshness is amazing. So that's something that you can enjoy, and just dry those cucumbers really dry and go ahead and powder them up, and then you've got that cucumber powder. Make dressing, make whatever you want to make with that as your base. And there is that dip recipe. Well, I think I finally did put it in the handout, but it's also in my red book as well. All right, so now let's go with some zucchini. I will probably just go ahead and use it. It's okay, but you could put this back in your dehydrator if you wanted to get it a little drier. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't repeat the question. She's saying because these are a little wet, they've accumulated the moisture from the air. How will I get this dry again? If you know you're going to use it right away, just go ahead and use it, or you could spread it out in your dehydrator and let this powder get dry again. Because it's dry, it doesn't powder up. You'll see when I powder the spinach, it just powders right up. So, yeah. Yep. All right, so now I'm going to bring up my Ankeshroom mixer, and I'm going to use my slicer shredder attachment. And that, if you have a garden and you have an Ankeshroom, I highly recommend the slicer shredder attachment because it will save you so much time. Okay, so here's the Ankeshroom mixer. How many of y'all have Ankeshroom mixers? Yeah, okay, a few of you. It's just really the finest mixer in the world. It's in our ministry in Haiti. We took 2 down there in 2016 and taught these young teenage boys, high school boys, how to make bread. And they make 500 to 800 rolls every day. Teenage boys hauling the mixer up to the kitchen every day, grabbing it, taking it up. And we've never replaced a knob, nothing. We've never repaired those mixers. They really, really do a job. 2016, we took them down there. So let me get my plug. Yeah. And then the optional attachments make it an incredible workhorse. I'm teaching a dehydration class in July. Yes, that's what month I'm in, July. And so I had to, because I'm leaving for Tanzania and I'll be gone right up until class time, I had to go in and make my sauerkraut yesterday or the other day. what did I say? Dehydration. Sorry, fermentation class in July. Yeah. So I had to go ahead and get my sauerkraut on because it takes about 3 weeks. I wanted it done before I leave so it's ready. So Brad came in here and grated 2 big heads of cabbage and apples and onion and whatever to go in that sauerkraut. And it just didn't take any time at all. So it's a wonderful, wonderful machine. So to attach your attachments to the Anchorshroom, you just flip the Anchorshroom on its side. Okay, this is your blender port here, which we'll use the blender in just a little while to powder some spinach and some other things and to make the fruit leathers. So that's a handy tool there. So now we're going to get the slicer shredder. It has a little post here in the back, on the base, and this is the slot that fits on that little post, and that's what turns it. So you just line that up and slide it on. I'm working backwards. It's backwards to me. All right, so let's get a tray. I'm actually going to get this tray and show you this. This is one of the ideas in this dehydration Bible. And I actually made it yesterday, and it was so delicious with my dehydrated rice. And then this is salsa leather instead of a fruit leather. So I took a cup of salsa and pureed it and spread it out on here and dried it. And now now I just peel it up, and to make this brown rice dish, I took my dry rice, I soaked it for about 15 or 20 minutes with a little piece of this salsa leather and some thyme and a little seasoning, and then I simmered it for 5 minutes after it had soaked, 5 or 10 minutes, and it was Spanish rice. How easy is that? So you can just, and how easy would this be to take someplace to just throw in instead of canned sauce? And you could do tomatoes, your tomatoes, that's how we did tomato sauce or tomato paste. So just super, super easy to do. So there's my salsa leather. And this is, you won't. So anyway, all right, so zucchini. We want to grate that zucchini so we can make some zucchini bread and zucchini muffins this winter. And so all we're going to do, cut those ends off, throw them in my compost bucket. And this is one thing that I love about the slicer shredder attachment to the Anchorshroom, is that it's not a bowl that you're having to stop and clean out. It's a continuous process, and I can just put my my dehydrator tray right there underneath it and just grate right on top of it, and that saves a whole step and something else to wash. Hang on just a minute. The slicer shredder comes with 3 blades. Comes with, this is the medium shredder. This is the fine grater for like Parmesan cheese or really, really fine grated cheese or really fine grated whatever. And then this is the slicer blade. So the slicer shredder comes with all 3. So yes, it is the medium grater. And then, so I just pull it out of there. And what I love about this also is there's very little room between the drum and the blade. And so you lose very, very little. You can see I have one little piece of zucchini here. Unlike a lot of them that have a wider half-inch, some of them have as much as a half-inch space there, then you get this big chunk at the end that you didn't get sliced. So there's my zucchini. Put this in here. All right, and just spread that out. Now I forget what my measurement is. Grated zucchini, 1/4 cup is going to be a cup dry. A 1/4 cup dry is going to be equivalent to a cup of fresh zucchini. I'm saying everything backwards today, sorry. So there's my zucchini. And then when it's dry, then just throw a handful in your soup or stew or casserole or whatever you're doing with it. If you want it sliced for zucchini slices, if you're going to use it that way, then just slice it however you're going to prepare it. So, yeah, okay. All of a sudden I thought, ooh, I didn't leave any to slice. Okay, the garden harvest bread that's in your recipe handout, it calls for grated zucchini, grated carrot, and grated apple. And all I do there is I go ahead and slice the amounts like for one recipe. And that's what I recommend if you know that your recipe calls for 2 cups of grated zucchini, fresh grated zucchini. What I do is go ahead and measure those 2 cups, spread that out on a tray, and then I store it like this in baggies, one recipe. Or measure that amount so that you know how much one recipe, how much your 2 cups equals. And that's what I did here. Does that make sense? Instead of, having all these little baggies. But for my garden harvest bread, I know that that's one recipe. And I just grab that and dump it. And then I don't have to even measure that. So, but if you're going to do a lot, it'd be easier to measure this amount. So that's about a half a cup. Okay? And then that way you can put it in a big bag all together. So, all right. So we're going to do about a medium carrot here. And a half a zucchini is about half of what you need there. Okay. The recipe says half cup grated carrot. Mm-hmm. It's dry. No, that recipe is fresh. That's what I'm telling you. That recipe is for fresh. And so that's what I've discovered, that it's a half a cup of grated apple is about a half of apple. It says 1 medium, but these were large. And then about a medium carrot and about a half of a zucchini. I actually measured it the other day, and that's what it kind of came out to. So that is raw. I'm going to show you how to make the bread with the dehydrated. Yeah, but that is, and so that was a great recipe for me to try. It was originally fresh, and I'm like, well, I don't have all this on hand, all year. So this is a great thing to just go ahead and dry and have it per recipe, and then it's ready to use. Mm-hmm. So for this is my grated zucchini, my grated apple, okay? And yes, of course, the recipe is for fresh, but I'm going to show you how to use the dry in place of it. Okay, so there is the grated apple, the grated carrot, the grated zucchini. If I were going to make it now, I would just use that just like it is. But I want this for when I don't have zucchini and carrot and apple on hand. Or if I'm going on a trip and I'm going to bake this bread, want something to throw in pancake batter or muffin batter or whatever, then I've got it. I'll do this later. Okay, so there's my apple, carrot, zucchini for one recipe. And just kind of spread it out. And all of this dried into that. Okay? All right. Clean this out just a little bit, slide it back, and we're going to make that garden harvest bread with the dried zucchini, apples, and carrots. Let you see how to use it. hey, can y'all take this to the kitchen and just get it washed out and ready for the next thing? Okay, so let's make that garden harvest bread. I dry most of these things overnight if they're really, really, really wet. So that's Brad's question was, how long does it take to dehydrate it? It's going to depend. Spinach, couple hours, okay? Zucchini, carrots, apples, they've got a lot of moisture there, and I want them really dry. And so I usually put things on in the evening, and then they dry overnight, and then I check them. Grapes are going to take 48 hours sometimes. Pineapple might take 48 hours. Bananas usually 24 hours. The rice, the brown rice fully cooked, was about 6 hours. Fruit leathers, beef jerky, 5 or 6 hours. Okay, so it just depends. Pardon me? Maybe a little. Her question is, does it take longer if the dehydrator's full? Not really. I haven't noticed that because the fan is in the back and it's blowing evenly across those trays. Maybe a little bit if it's full of really wet, like tomatoes, or the whole thing's full of pineapple, something that's got a lot of moisture in it, yes. And speaking of that, of putting like foods in the dehydrator, I'm not going to put fruit leather and onions in there together, or I'm going to have fruit leather that tastes like onions. And I think you can figure that out. But I will do apples, carrots, zucchini, fruit leather, you know, all in the same dehydrator. I kind of keep my savory things over here and the more bland and mild things over here. So even though the zucchini might not be fruity, I wouldn't mind doing it in there with apples or pineapple, because they don't really, they're not volatile, or not, that's not the right word. They don't give off just an abundance of flavor and smell. Mm-hmm. I haven't found that to be particularly true. The question is, do I find that the sheets maintain the smell? No, not really. They clean right up, because I do kale, which is, yeah, you're going to do that outside because it stinks. It just stinks, but it tastes delicious. So, yeah, which y'all could go ahead and do some, y'all got the fruity things ready. Let's see, what were we going to do next? That's good. That's good. All right. So let's make our bread here. So this is soft white wheat that I milled, and it already has my salt and my baking powder, or baking soda, I think is it in there. And so I'm just going to add my other ingredients. But before I do, I'm going to take my one recipe baggie. This was exactly what I just grated: a half an apple, about a medium carrot, a half a zucchini. I'm going to put it in a bowl. And when you're going to bake with your dried things, and you're going to put it in something like a muffin or a pancake or a bread type mixture, then you want to typically rehydrate it. If you don't, it's going to dry, it's going to suck up some of the moisture in your batter and dry it out. If you were going to throw this in soup or stew or something that had a lot of liquid that you're just going to simmer, then there's no reason to rehydrate it. But when I'm going to use it to bake with, I'm just going to rehydrate it a little bit. So I start with hot water and just let it soak while I'm getting my other ingredients ready. And it doesn't really matter. Some recipes or some books will tell you when you're rehydrating, they give you an exact amount of water to rehydrate it with. I don't worry about that. I just pour plenty of water over there, let it soak, and then I just drain that off. So it's rehydrated that back up to basically what it would be like fresh. If you're going to do a carrot salad or something where you're going to eat those vegetables more raw and you want them more crisp, then just use ice water and let it rehydrate with ice water, and you can do that, okay? So while that is rehydrating, just going to add my honey granules. I think, does that call it honey granules or sucanat with honey? Honey granules, okay. I didn't know how old that recipe was. I think I edited it and fixed it. All right. So all we're going to do is just whisk together our dry ingredients. And like I said, I already had my baking powder and my salt in there. Now we're going to add our cinnamon some grated nutmeg. I like nutmeg. And there's really nothing like fresh nutmeg. If you don't like nutmeg, try it fresh and you might change your mind. Okay, so whisk in your dry ingredients just like you do any other quick bread, because you don't want that baking soda or salt or even the cinnamon to be just clump up in a clump where you bite into that once you've added your wet ingredients. So now we just make a well in the center. This is my 1/4 cup of oil, 1/4 cup of buttermilk, my eggs. Hang on, I just had a mess with my egg. Let me clean my mess up. If you don't have buttermilk, you can use just regular milk, and then you want to do, the ratio is for every cup of buttermilk, you do a tablespoon of some type of acid. Could be lemon juice, it can be vinegar, it can be one of our infused vinegars if you want one of those flavors. A tablespoon for every cup of regular milk, or say you have a dairy allergy and you want to go with an alternative milk, because you can see this was oil and not butter or something like that. So you can use an alternative milk, coconut milk, rice milk, soy milk, whatever. And so it's a tablespoon for every cup of milk, buttermilk needed. Tablespoon for every cup of regular milk or alternative milk to get that acid. Whenever you use baking soda in a recipe, you need to have the acid of buttermilk or honey or lemon or something to activate that sodium bicarbonate. Okay, so now I'm going to just chop my walnuts. And when I make bread like this, I like them kind of coarsely chopped. So I'm using this handy little food chopper. And I forgot to introduce Brad's mom. She's here with us today. Back there with Brad is Judy Becker. That is Brad's mom. And she is the first person I ever saw use one of these. And she used it to chop strawberries, kind of half-frozen strawberries for strawberry shortcake. And when I saw her take that thing out and just go chop, 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 and they were pureed so beautifully for shortcake, I'm like, what is that? And so then I found them, and then when we started our business, I'm like, we got to carry these little things. They're so handy. They chop eggs, chop potatoes, you just have it, you'll use it. So anyway, there's my nuts. And you can see there's not a lot of liquid here in this bread. Not a lot of ingredients. So now our zucchini, our carrots, and our apples are rehydrating. It'd probably sit there a little bit longer if I had milled my flour and gotten all my ingredients out, but it really doesn't matter as long as you get just some good water to those to rehydrate them a little bit there. So I just drain that off, and I don't even really drain it because I know that this maybe could have had a little more moisture in it, but those carrots are crunchy, you know, so just dump it in. Okay. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more buttermilk since I lost part of my egg there, just to give it a little liquid. I'm actually using my homemade kefir, which we'll go over how to make this. Don't let a child see you pour that. I lost about half that egg when it cracked all over the counter. They crack a little easier when they're room temperature. Yeah, that's what the batter should look like. I used soft wheat here. Ezekiel mixture would be great. I used the soft white. new soft red that we have that's Georgia grown. That would be delicious here as well. And I started to use it, but when I was milling for the biscuits, I had milled too much. I don't know why, but so I was like, oh, so go ahead and use the white wheat. So now we're just going to put it in our USA bread pan. And these are non-stick, truly, truly non-stick. So if you don't have a USA pan, yes, you do need to grease them some way. I always forget to tell people why I'm not greasing my pan. The USA pans are made, guess where? USA. And they are truly non-stick. They're aluminized steel. They're coated with silicone, which is just a beautiful non-stick material, and you just don't have to spray them, grease them, oil them in any way, even the cake pan. So there's our bread dough. We're going to get that in the oven. Yes, this is. Actually, yes, it is. Yeah. So it's a 1 pound size. So it bakes for about 45 minutes. Let me stick this back in the fridge. All right. Okay, now I want to show you how to make one of my most favorite things with zucchini. And you're going to love this. This is a great vegetable chip. And once we seasoned it up, when we ate it, we were like, this tastes kind of like pepperoni. And so now we use it as a vegetable pepperoni on our pizza. So it's really, really, really tasty. Now here's where a mandolin slicer comes in to play. This mandolin slicer, my daughter actually found at a houseware show, and she came home because we had been looking at one. And the one we started with, you know, was sold on TV, and it had all the parts in the little plastic basket that saved all the blades, and you had this over here, and you didn't remember where you put any of it. And so anyway, this mandolin, this is it. It is all self-contained. This is your slider. It has spikes. This is your hand guard so you don't slice your own fingers. And this is all your blades, all you need. It's got your straight blade, your waffle blade. It's got your, let me turn it back there. This turns up your thickness here, and then this shoots up your julienne. And I know y'all can't see it very well there, but it shoots up your julienne blades. So it's all contained. You don't need, there's no other blades, there's no other anything to go with it. And then to clean it, basically just flip it all open like that, rinse it off, and it's clean. And then just let it dry. So easy to use, and it will even do waffle fries, your waffle cut potatoes. I think I might have a potato. If we have time, I'll show you at the end how to do the waffle potatoes. So easy. But the directions tell you. So, and then this just slides on, and it'll stay on. Okay, let me make sure I have that down. There we go. All right, so I've chosen my thickness for my zucchini slices. That might actually be a little thick, yeah. How many levels of thickness? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it'll go pretty thick. So now I have discovered that with zucchini, I can cut them in half, and 2 will fit in here. Okay, and so I check my slice. There's my great slice. All right. I don't know, Brad. You'll have to come measure it. About that thick. Ah, it's wobbling on me. Yes, it is number 1. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take this off a minute. I usually get it started. There we go. There we go. And so I kind of hold it like this and just give it some slight pressure as I slice, but nothing major. and you can turn it. I kind of just, I don't know why, I think that's the way you do the waffle, is you turn it a quarter turn each time you come back, and that makes it cut the waffles. But so I just get used to turning it. But that also keeps your vegetable kind of even instead of getting that front side lopsided. So it gives you nice, even slices. Okay, and like I said, there's one last little slice, and it's perfect. And there's my slices. To clean it, I just pop that cover up, pop my blade like that, take it over here, and just rinse it off. If I do something sticky like apples, I will keep this flat, turn it to 0, where it's not got that blade up, and then I'll scrub this just so it's not sticky. But things like zucchini can pretty much just rinse it off and then just let it dry. I usually open it up like that so it dries. So that's the Mandolin slicer. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to make our marinated zucchini. And these I sprinkle with the seasoning, and I let them marinate overnight. It'll draw the liquid off, so it will be a little more liquidy, but but that gets the seasoning, the flavors melded in there. And I learned a trick. I used to put it all in a bowl and try to toss it, but that was the hardest part of these, was to get that seasoning on there. So now I've learned that if I just lay them in a tray, like on a dish like this, okay, now I'll show you the seasoning that I'm going to use. I'm going to use for this, and there's other seasonings out there that you pick your flavor, like if you're doing some other vegetable chip. I don't know, I can't think right off mine what I would use for cucumber or some other kind of vegetable chip. But this roasted red pepper, this is a company called To Market To Market. No salt, no MSG, no sugar. It is just dried vegetables and spices. So this one's onion, red pepper, garlic, pepper, paprika. That's what's in here. And when it says roasted red pepper, it actually does have almost a smoky aroma and taste to it. So I found that it was really good to make these chips out of that, and that's what made it taste so much like pepperoni. So because these are not, there's no salt in here, lost my little cup. Oh, there it is. I add a little bit of salt, and then also because it's big chunks of, I don't know if you can see and tell, there's big chunks of onions and pepper, and things. That's not going to stick to the zucchini. So what I do there is I powder it so that it's fine and more sprinkly, so that you're getting a good stick to those vegetables. So I'm going to use about 3 tablespoons should be enough. Yesterday or earlier this week when I was drying, I did about, I think it was 5 zucchini, and 4 tablespoons worked out almost perfectly for those 5 slices of, 5 zucchini slices. Roasted red pepper. Roasted red, the pepper spread. Yes, by To Market To Market. We have it in 2-ounce packages and 1-pound packages. One of my favorite, of course, is Jack and the Bean. If you've been to a Getting Started class, you know that we put that in the refried beans. So okay, so that's got it. Do you see what I mean by powdering it? So now it's a sprinkle instead of chunks of onions and dried peppers. And that makes it easier to get on the zucchini, but then also it'll stick to it. So now I just take if you have a little sprinkler, you could sprinkle it on, but I just douse it with a little bit of this. And I don't worry about getting it super, I mean, I want it all to have some, but I'm going to layer on top now. Might should have cut these a little thicker. And then just sprinkle. Just keep going. So I'm going to pass these off to my wonderful helpers over there to keep sprinkling. And then I'll just let these marinate overnight. They'll probably marinate till Monday. That's okay too. But at least, at least a good 5 or 6 hours or overnight, and let that get nice and flavorful. Okay. All right. So I just keep layering, keep going, keep sprinkling, and then I stick them in the refrigerator to marinate overnight. Okay? So there's that. Do you need that? Okay. All righty. I think I might have enough for them to taste. Well, they're going to taste it on the pizza. So y'all get to taste that on the pizza. Just plain. Yeah, maybe give them one to taste just plain. Okay. All right. Get my workspace cleaned up here. All right, let's do apples. Apple season is coming, though we just started summer, but it is coming. Again, I love my mandolin slicer for sliced apples. And I'm going to put it a little thicker this time for my apples. Now, to slice my apples, if you want your sliced apples, you can just slice them plain. I like to, if you want to make cinnamon apples, we're going to sprinkle them with a little cinnamon and zucchini and make dried cinnamon apples. And I do not worry at all about coring my apples. If you want to, you can. But it actually makes a nice little look. Where are my apples? And the seeds will pop right out when they're dry, you see? So they'll just come out, and it's a nice little apple. And you can eat the core. There's nothing wrong with the core. So, yeah, that's your apples. So I saved myself a step. I use zucchini for my cinnamon and sugar. Let me get me a sheet. You can go ahead and serve them an apple. So what you're going to get now, we're going to do an apple, we're going to do grapes, we're going to do bananas, and fruit leather. Is that what they're getting? Yep. So we're going to do all of that. Now we're going to do our fruity things. So here's how we do our apples. So just stick the apple in there. And so there's my apple. I just spread it out on the tray. Apples take up a good bit of space, so you'll like having this 9 trays here. If you go to the apple farm this fall and get some apples, you'll like having this big tray. So about 1.5 apples fills up a tray. And you can see There's some pieces that are ugly, and that's my little baggie here that I'm gonna powder here in just a little bit, okay? So we'll do one more. This is number 2, but it doesn't matter if you want a more delicate apple slice, but just play around with it a little bit and find what you want. I think I found that one was, well, let's look at one. We'll see what one does. You could do one. Oh, now I need to do another one. No, that's okay. Well, no, there it is. That's 1, and that's 2. So 1 is actually pretty nice too, but just remember it's going to get even thinner when it dries. So I think I decided that I liked level 2. And some of it's going to depend on how hard you push down as well, how hard you press. So sometimes you can get a little thicker than 1 if you give it a little more pressure when you slice it. So there's that tray. I forgot to mention, this is one great thing about the Excalibur, is that it is made in the USA. Not many things we can say that now. So I'm going to leave this tray plain, and this one I will sprinkle with a little cinnamon and honey, sucanat. I think I put the mixture there in your book. If you're an essential oil user, you can use your essential oils, and I put that in there as well. If you have cinnamon, just use the cinnamon. It only takes like a drop, and it only takes a few little crystals of the honey granules to sprinkle on these. But then they don't turn brown. They're still nice and light color. So you can do that. If you don't have cinnamon, if you have cassia oil, I felt like the cassia oil wasn't quite strong enough, and so it needed just a little drop of clove. So I think I put that in there. Yeah. I don't think you do. I don't think you do. But now I do. The question was, do I need to core the pineapple before you dry them? I think you can dry that core if you want to. If you can eat it, do it. Okay? Pardon me? No, I didn't powder the sucanat. It was just sucanat with the cinnamon. So that was my apples. What? Yes, the ripeness of the fruit is going to depend a lot. I mean, it's kind of like when you're preserving food, you don't want a food that's already past its prime. You're drying to have all those great nutrients. So yeah, you don't want an almost rotten fruit. If, not almost rotten, but if you have, well, what I do, like if my grapes get a little bit discolored, they're starting to get old, I may throw them in the freezer and use them in fruit leathers or fruit roll-ups. If things get a little overripe that might be too ripe to even dehydrate, then I would just use those in a fruit leather or a smoothie, or dry them for banana bread or something like that. So, yes. Yes. Yep. If you want it a little crunchier, dry it a little longer. Yeah. I find that Excalibur really does a nice job of drying. I actually dried those apples in another dehydrator that we carry, but we don't have it right now. And it doesn't seem to get them crisp. Like the Excalibur gets them crisp and crunchy. But I had my Excalibur full of beef jerky and kale chips, and that wouldn't have tasted good with the apples. Okay, so now let's look at apples for apple pie or apple cobbler, or if you're wanting to bake with those apples. So this is a handy tool. How many of y'all have these? This apple peeler core slicer? I love it. This one has its own suction cup there that sticks right to your counter. You just pull this little lever. It doesn't like that seam. I just couldn't figure out why it wouldn't stick to my counter one time. Finally, I realized it's the seam on the counter it doesn't like. So you pull this lever, you pull the little post back, and then you just attach your apple by pushing it on there. If you want the peel on, so if you like apple pie with peels on or apple crisp with peels on, which I do, I don't typically peel my apples, then you're going to leave this little guy you're going to pull it back. This is the peeler, so you're going to pull it back, take this little thing and lock it away so that that won't peel it. And then you just turn. Okay, and there it is. And then you have your slices. Perfect for apple pie. You can just lay them in there. And see, these are a tad bit thicker, but you want them that thick usually for apple pie. So that's your apple. And if you wanted to go ahead and put cinnamon and stuff on them, you could. Okay, so now let's do one with the peel off. The hardest part is getting the core off. And you just pull that back, attach your apple. And now we're going to release this little lever, pull that back, release that little lever, and that engages the peeler. So now it'll miss a little bit every now and then, but it gets most of it. Whoops, it got a little piece stuck. Hang on. Let's do another one. It's got a little piece of the peel stuck and it wouldn't peel it.
Do you dry that peel?
Yes, I do. And you can powder it along with some of these ugly slices here, or you can throw it in a pot and simmer. Well, why is it not peeling the rest of the way? There we go. Well, that one didn't do very good either. It keeps catching a little, I think these are a little waxy because they're not totally in season yet. And I think it's catching a piece of the peel in the slicer because normally it'll completely, well, that's interesting. Never done that before either. So anyway, there's my apples, slightly peeled. Just spread them out. And I usually just put the peel somewhere on there or on its own separate tray. And then I'll powder that with the rest of, like I said, the ugly apples, or I'll throw it in a pot of apple cider or a pot of water with some cinnamon sticks if you're wanting to make your house smell nice or something like that. So I don't waste anything. So all my cores go in there. I'm going to save that because I don't want to use up all the space on my tray. Again, this guy is super easy to clean. I'm just going to rinse it off. I like tools that are easy to clean. I like tools that make my job very easy. If it's harder to take the tool out and set it up and then break it down and clean it than it is to just chop the onion or slice the apple or whatever, then it's really not that helpful to me. But you can see that's easy, and so is the mandolin. Y'all are very quiet. Are y'all hungry? How'd you like the oatmeal? The carrot cake oatmeal and the biscuits. Yes, you can. Her question is, can you do it with oatmeal? You can pretty much cook and rehydrate most anything, okay? And that's what this Dehydrator Bible book, it has a lot of instructions in it. In fact, what else I did, one of the other recipes in there was an apple rice cinnamon pudding. And so I rehydrated the rice, put my chopped up my dried apples, put a little bit of sucanat in there, and then just let it soak for about 20 minutes. And then just simmer it for about 5, and it was this delicious rice pudding that was apples with my dried apples and my dried rice already cooked. Yeah, I love the salsa idea. I'd never thought of that. But also one of the things with powdering, like making these, like cooked sweet potatoes. Spread it out like a leather, like we're about to make fruit leather. Spread it out like a leather and let it go ahead and get crispy. Instead of leathery, let it go ahead and dry, what I would call too much. Powder it. You've got perfect baby food. Rehydrate. All those baby food powders that moms get when they're on the road so they can just rehydrate it with some hot water, you can make it. It's so, so easy. And the same with fruit leather. If you ever let your fruit leather go too long where it's not leathery, it's crispy, just powder it. I actually made some jam out of a fruit leather. I just broke it all up, simmered it in some water, and in about 10-15 minutes, it spread like jam. Yes, sucanat. Her question is, can I explain about sucanat? Sucanat and what we call honey granules are an evaporated cane juice product. It's the juice of the sugar cane extracted, boiled into a syrup. To make sugar, white sugar, it's 13 processes of extracting and then crystallization out. But with sucanat and honey granules, you take the juice of the sugar cane and you just evaporate the moisture off. So it's a more granulated, 97% sugar, so it's still a sugar product and it's still a cane juice product, but a lot less refined than your white sugar and even now your brown sugar, because brown sugar is a byproduct of the processing, but today they take everything out to white sugar and then add a little caramel coloring and a little molasses back. So your sucanat is the full juice of the sugar cane, all your molasses is there, everything is there, evaporated off. Honey granules, on the other hand, is still an evaporated cane juice product. They take the juice of the sugar cane, take the molasses off, add a mild honey to that sugar cane syrup, and then evaporate it. So it is a perfect, perfect white sugar substitute. So honey granules, 1-for-1, can be substituted for white sugar. Sucanat, 1-for-1 for your brown sugar. So it's just a little less refined. I still say it should be eaten in moderation. Honey is my sweetener of choice. In fact, I need to modify that Garden Harvest bread. You could totally use probably a half a cup of honey there instead of the 3/4 cup of honey granules. But anyway, so that's, yeah. I prefer honey where honey will work. Alrighty. Oh, I forgot about making the pizza dough. Yeah, we better get that done. I just overlooked that in my notes here. Yes. Yes, yes. I think the question is the difference in freeze drying and air drying. And it is, and I thought about this last night that I need to make sure you know, so thank you for asking, that it is a different process. And I've got to really go back and look at my notes as far as nutrition. I think the nutrition is there. It's just a different process, and that's why your freeze drying they're fluffy. I don't know how to explain it. It's a very different process, and home freeze dryers are much more expensive than your air dryers. But there is a place for it. I mean, it makes pretty things, but as far as nutrition, I think they're about the same. I really don't know, so I'd have to look at that again, and I should have looked up that before. Yeah, that's what I think. It's just a different process, but it's still a dehydration. Well, I made all this pizza dough so I can make a pizza for you, and then I almost forgot. So I want to get it in the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and roll out a pizza, and then we'll come back to our bananas and grapes and fruit leather. So I want to get them making pizza. So I actually made this pizza dough yesterday and stuck it in the refrigerator. Kind of blew the top off. And give that one back to him. There you go. So yeah, when I realized in the dehydration class, I'm like, they're not eating very much, you know, a little fruit and vegetables here, a little beef jerky. So I was like, okay, we're going to make the veggie chips and make some pizza. This is just the basic bread dough. I use my basic bread dough for just about everything. I do have, you know, a traditional pizza crust, but I find I forget that I have it, and I use my basic bread dough for just about everything.
Can you explain, as you're doing that, about why you would use putting gluten in bread?
Why you would put gluten in the bread. The gluten in my basic bread dough is completely optional, and the only reason it is there as an option is because the second year we were in business was a terrible year for wheat. They had flooding, and that's what determines the rainfall during the growing season determines the protein content of that wheat more than anything. You hear all this about, oh, you know, they've genetically modified it so it'll have more protein and more gluten and all of that, and that's just not correct. First of all, wheat's not genetically modified. But second of all, genetics determines the kind of proteins that are there, but rainfall during the growing season determines the protein content for that year. So 1993 was a terrible, terrible, terrible year for wheat. I remember we got 5,000 pounds of wheat in, and I went to make bread with it, and it just was a goopy mess. Instead of coming together and getting stretchy, it just got weaker and stickier and just was horrible. And I remember I called our supplier, which is different than the one we use now, and I was like, what's wrong with my wheat? And he kind of went, it's a bad year for wheat this year. And I'm like, well, that would have been nice to have known before we bought all this. But I mean, there's nothing they could do about it. So what I discovered then, gluten is the protein of the wheat. And so that's what enables the bread to rise. So that's why I have it in my recipe as an optional ingredient. When the wheat is not such a good year and not very high protein, it really helps to add just a little bit of gluten there. But this year the wheat is, or last year's wheat was very, very good. What we're using now is very good. So you shouldn't need to add the gluten. But the gluten, yeah, the best quality wheat we've had in years right now. The white is a little more temperamental than the red, but it's still very, very good. This is all hard white. Whenever I make pizza dough, typically I'll use hard white because I don't want to taste the bread. I want to taste the pizza. So, yeah.
Let me just remind the people that 1993 was the year that the Mississippi River flooded so badly. There was rainfall all over the country, and it was just not good for the wheat. We need to have 2 good rains in July and no rain in August in Montana for our wheat to be top quality. So that's what we pray for every year.
What's a good bread that you have, recipe that you have for bread for people who have that gluten allergy?
I mean, we have some gluten-free recipes that if they need to really truly go gluten-free. Most people, her question is, do we have a bread recipe for people that really do have gluten allergies? Most people are not truly celiacs. They are sensitive to wheat and gluten because the bread that is in the store is pure gluten, which, no, it's pure protein. Gluten is actually technically a culinary term. It's not even something that's in wheat. It's a culinary term for the stretchy. Give me one of those balls of dough.
Refuse my bread that's your recipe. And like, I'm allergic to gluten, and I'm like, I didn't.
No, well, gluten is there. Okay, this is gluten. See that? It's a culinary term given to the stretchy substance that forms when your dough is kneaded, okay? Wheat is genetically unique. The whole wheat family is genetically unique. It's the only family of the grains that has genetically a specific sequence and type of proteins that when you wet that flour, a stretchy substance called gluten forms. Gluten is necessary when you're making yeasted breads. As the yeast feeds on the flour, the wheat, the carbohydrates in the grain itself, in the dough, whatever, if you've put honey in, it produces carbon dioxide gas. It takes this stretchy substance, gluten, to trap that gas and stretch, and that's what enables the bread to rise. Did you ever wonder why we typically don't make bread out of anything but the wheat family? And you don't make yeasted bread out of corn. You don't make yeasted bread out of rice. You don't make yeasted bread out of millet or buckwheat or anything but the wheat family. And since the beginning of time, wheat has been used to make yeasted leavened breads, whether it was sourdough or now commercial yeast, because it's the only family, wheat, spelt, rye, barley, some little lower, and doesn't make great yeasted bread, but you can still do it. So wheat, spelt, barley, einkorn, emmer, rye, those are all in the wheat family, and they all make great bread. And that's why they've been used since the beginning of time to make yeasted bread. So when someone says they have a gluten allergy, what has happened is now when the commercially processed flour came on the scene in the early 1900s, late 1800s, what happened then, they sifted the bran and the germ away, which the bran's your outer coating, the germ is your interior part of that grain. That's where all your fiber, all your vitamins, all your minerals, all your nutrients are in the bran and germ. The flour that's left, the white flour, it's called the endosperm, is protein and starch. That's all that's there. God never intended us to eat that protein and starch. Great proteins, great amino acids that we need. And that's another thing. Most people, all these high protein diets, they don't realize grains are considered a carbohydrate, but they have lots of protein in them. They have lots of necessary amino acids. But God never intended us to eat just the protein and starch without the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber, the digestive enzymes, the organisms, all of that. And that is what has caused the problem in America today. And I can go through a whole thing. I'm really thinking, last night I was like, I need to make a video to explain digestion and the other problem. Proteins are digested in your stomach. Let's just keep it simple. There's a whole process there. It takes acid to digest proteins. That's why your stomach produces acid to activate those protein digestive enzymes. What is one of the number one drugs in America that people are taking? Do y'all know? Prilosec, Nexium. Those are antacids. They calm that stomach acid down. Therefore, that hurts your digestive of those proteins. And that's what gluten is. It's the amino acids and the proteins. That's all it is. It's not some evil thing that somebody put there. It's that stretchy substance that forms from those proteins being hydrated. So there's a lot of misinformation about gluten and gluten sensitivities. Celiac disease is a real disease, and no one will ever be able to eat wheat if you're a true celiac, genetic celiac. But it's less than 1% of people in this country are true celiacs. Everybody else, yes, you got stomach issues, you've got sensitivities, you've got all these issues, and you go off of wheat, but you're not going off of wheat. You're going off of commercially processed white bread is what most people quit eating that. And I'm telling you, you'll feel a whole lot better. I agree with that. But the problem is not wheat. It's the commercially processed bread. And even what's called whole grain bread in the store has tons of extra gluten flour added to it. So the proportions, they're disproportionate than the way God intended it. Okay? So that being said, there's nothing you can tell someone that says, no, I can't eat your bread, and they're scared of it. I get it, because it's severe stomach pain. I get it. But most people can eat freshly milled flour. And I'm telling you, since this whole gluten-free, grain-free, anti-grain, anti-everything started, we've had so many people, once we begin to educate, kind of explain to them what gluten is, they go, I'm going to try this bread, and they have no problems at all. One of my favorite stories is my son, when he had the bakery, he did farmers markets. And, of course, he had a gluten-free bread. A mom came up and said, my daughter gets totally doubled over in pain, abdominal cramps, very sick every time she eats anything with gluten in it. And she vomits. And she doesn't really care for the gluten-free bread, though my son's was very delicious. And so he explained to her, just like I just did, and she's like, she just wants a sandwich. I'm going to try it. So she bought a loaf of his regular freshly milled flour, bread and white wheat. And the little girl, she was about 12, I think, at the time, little short. Now she's a tall girl for her age. But anyway, she came running up to the table the next week and said, Mr. Dave, I love your bread. I ate a sandwich every day, and I never got sick. And we hear that over and over and over because what people have that they think is a gluten allergy or gluten sensitivity is to the junky stuff in the store. And we all are sensitive to that. You just may not know it. If you're constipated or, get stuffy nose, yeah. So anyway, all right, let's get back to pizza. Sorry. All right. All right, so I'm just sprinkling this with a little corn flour, cornmeal. And actually, I've discovered this is popcorn ground in the Wonder Mill on the coarsest setting. If you like a little grittier cornmeal, that's what you want to use. Popcorn will grind up a little grainier. And so I like it for putting on my pizza pan here, because what I'm actually doing is I'm going to put my crust on this pan, but I'm going to slide it off once I get it topped and put it and cook it on a pizza stone. So I'm using my pizza pan almost like what's called a pizza peel. So you just want to put a little bit of cornmeal down there. Put your crust on. My hands are greasy. Can you open that? You got on gloves. I don't know if you can either. There we go. I got it. Okay, I'm just gonna. I used the caramelized garlic oil last time, but I guess I'll just spritz it with some oil here. An Italian taught me to spritz it with oil. If y'all want to get the caramelized garlic and use that for their pizzas, our infused oils are amazing, and I love the caramelized garlic. Just gives it such a nice flavor. But an Italian told me that if you'll baste your pizza crust with oil before you put your sauce on, it'll keep the sauce from just making the dough, the crust soggy. So, and this is just a commercial pizza sauce. You can make your own with dehydrated tomatoes. When they come in, powder them. And then just to make sauce, just rehydrate them with some water to the thickness that you want it. Add a little Italian seasoning, and my goodness, it tastes like you're eating a fresh tomato just right there on your pizza. Okay, here's that. Let me get the cheese. I forgot it. I saw a church, those marquees at church, or I guess it wasn't a church, I'm sorry, it was just one of those marquees, the signs, that they put the letters out there, and it said, ban shredded cheese, make America great again. Did y'all get it? I thought it was funny, because I'm telling you, there's a big difference when you grate the cheese yourself and when you buy pre-grated cheese. The pre-shredded cheese, if you've ever bought some, and lost it in your refrigerator, and you come back and you see it about 6 months later, it hasn't molded. That's because there's all kinds of anti-molding enzymes there, and then they dust it with cornstarch so that it separates nicely. And there's just a total difference in shredding it yourself. So this is mozzarella, and I used my slicer shredder to grate all this yesterday. Oh, I forgot to shred Parmesan. Here you go. This is for you. And I have another jar if you need it, I think. So here's my pepperoni. I'm going to put them on a little heavy to make sure that everybody gets a slice of pepperoni when we slice the pizza. I don't know that you necessarily have to put this many on. Did y'all like them? Did they taste them? Did y'all taste the pepperonis? Oh, okay. Okay. You're going to... Yeah. I throw all my vegetable scraps, everything I'm cutting, and then when it gets full, I take it out and dump it in a compost bin, or either I bury it in a section of I don't have a compost bin per se, but I bury it in a place in my yard. Don't bury it in your garden, or your critters will come help themselves to it. Oh my goodness, I'm so mad at the deer in my yard. They ate my sunflowers. My flower garden. They ate my sunflowers. I'm pretty mad. I have box Brad built me a few years ago. I love cut flowers. I love having flowers around the house, so I planted sunflowers and zinnias several years now. So I had these particular sunflowers, and they had just started to pop open. They weren't completely open. And I looked out after the rain the other night, and they were laying down, and one was like broken off. I'm like, how bad was that storm? It didn't sound so bad to me. And I went over, and it's a raised bed, and they had eaten the tops out of all my sunflowers. So anyway, wouldn't be a veggie pizza if we didn't add some peppers and onions. So if y'all don't like it, sorry, pick it off. Okay, so there's our pizza. So I've got my oven preheating with my pizza stones. These are our Meal Henri pizza stones. They have one that's round, that's like for a pizza. Then we have the big square ones, like in here, that are your grilling and big pizza stones. So you can use either one. So I'm going to slide it off here. Up. I'm going to need to put it over here because that is not on. I don't know when it got turned off. You might want to put the other one back in, the one the biscuits were on. All right, so here's my stone. And now they do make a product called a pizza peel, but I find that my little pizza pans work. And I just take a spatula and I just get it started, and I slide it off. I may lose a few ingredients when I slide it off, but I just throw them back on. That one didn't slide off very well, but hey. And it usually only takes about 10 minutes at 450 degrees. Okay, so here's that. And here's this. There you go, madam. I forgot to introduce, this is Sherry, our class helper today, good friend. Here's this for rolling the dough. All right, let's check our bread. Woo. Okay. This is our garden harvest bread that we made out of the dehydrated veggies. The one I made before class was made with the dehydrated veggies as well. All right. Here's this. All right. Glad she reminded me about the pizzas. Now we can go back to the fruits. Y'all are so quiet. Do I need to like play some music or get y'all revved up? I feel real low energy today too. Do y'all feel it? Am I a little like, Did you like the vegetable zucchini? It's got a little spice to it. You haven't tried it yet? The kale was your favorite? We're going to make that. Who didn't? Somebody told me before class they didn't like kale. Who was it? It wasn't you. Who was it before class? Go ahead. You can tell me. Oh, it was her. I knew there was somebody that I was like, I don't really like kale either, except the chips are good, aren't they? And that's such a nice, to me, that's, they don't have any dairy. They taste like they have Parmesan cheese on them or something. And I'm even made these a little different today, and I'm going to show you how I made them. But instead of soy, I use the cocoa amino acids, the aminos, sorry, not amino acids, but the coconut. So this is not a soy product at all, because I know, and it's a little sweeter and not quite as salty as the soy. Even the naturally brewed soy is what I used to use. That's what that Namasoyu is. That's a naturally brewed soy, but I use the cocoa aminos. Yes, and I did for the beef jerky as well, yeah. But I found it was a little sweeter. When I tasted the kale chips, I'm like, whew, it's a little sweeter, not quite as salty. But either way, I thought they were good. I gave her everything, yep. And that's cooking at 10 minutes. Let's see, I'm gonna change this lower oven. Okay. Fruit leathers, you can do whatever you want. There is no recipe in the handout because there is no recipe. Whatever you want, throw it in there. What I used to do was, so I told you I had 9 kids. I had 7 biological children. If y'all are wondering, like, does she really not know how many children she has? I do. 7 biological. So 7 were at home at one time. My oldest daughter married when my youngest was about 3, and anyway, then it goes down from there. But anyway, and then we adopted 2 teenage boys in 2009 and 2010. We only had 2 girls at home. So if I keep saying, well, I had 7 kids at home, I do have 9 children, but they weren't all home at the same time. But so I would buy grapes, and you know, another thing is, if you want your children to eat healthy, then have healthy food around. Like, have a bowl of bananas, have a bowl of apples. If you don't have that out where they can get it, and you have chips in the cabinet, guess what they're going to eat? They're going to eat chips in the cabinet, so because it's easy. But so I would always had a bowl of grapes around, and so they would pick them. Well, if they started seeing too many stems, no grapes, nobody was going to eat the last 20 grapes that were on that stem, that big bunch. It just wasn't going to happen. I'm like, okay. So I would come along and pick them all off and put them in a bowl, and then put them out there, and then they would. Don't ask me why. But anyway, am I the only one? Yeah. And bananas, you know, if I made fruit salad and then we had leftover, if the bananas turned dark at all, nope, not eating that. That's something weird about that. So, yeah, Ryman's our son that we adopted from Latvia. Didn't speak, he spoke enough English to fairly communicate with us, but he still, they flip their verbs or their adjectives are behind the noun. And so he called bananas, if they got like that, no, he wasn't eating that, not even that. And so he called that a black almost banana. A black almost banana. And we still tease him, and if he knew I said that to all of you and it's on video, he would be really upset. But anyway, it's okay. He's not here, so now, there you go. But yeah, so they're just things. So I learned that fruit salad that I made that had now dark bananas, throw it in a blender, make a fruit leather with it. I even used to make a fruit salad a lot when the kids were home, and I'd put it, just apples, pineapple, banana, oranges, whatever, chop up in there. And then I always tossed in a little vanilla yogurt. And I've even made a fruit leather out of that with the yogurt on it, and it was delicious. So there is no recipe for fruit leather. Blend it up. It will do it. And even if you want to put some greens in there, do it. Okay? All right, so let me show you how easy bananas. Y'all ready for bananas? All right. You like those bananas? Yeah. How about the pineapple and banana? That's my favorite. Just eating it. And see, kids, they're going to eat that. All right. Watch this. That's it. How much do y'all need me to demo? I have one banana here. And that one's probably a little thick, and that's why some of them are a little chewier than others. I usually like about that thin, okay? But if you're right-handed like me, it's kind of hard to see that side. Yes? I've done peaches and strawberries. They take, peaches not so much, but strawberries took a pretty long time to rehydrate. And there's places where I really want them frozen. So I don't do strawberries as much, but I have done peaches. I've done mango is delicious. That's what we're hoping to do in Haiti, is now show them how to dehydrate. And because they get mangoes, when they're in season, they're just inundated with mangoes. Like right about now, it's mango season. And I saw a picture from one of the orphanages that we support, and they had a little, like a garden wagon. It was full of mangoes. And yes, there's 500 kids. No, yeah, 150 children live there. About 500 come to the school, but can only eat so many mangoes, because that was just one crop. And then bananas just come in. Bananas come in pretty much all the time there, but so we're hoping to teach them that in Tanzania as well. I think Brad was watching how to make a solar dehydrator the other night, so maybe we can teach that in Tanzania. Grapes, I just slice them. Yep, you can, because this will take about 24 hours. Well, normally I do more bananas than this at one time, so I would fill the whole tray with bananas if I'm going to do them, unless I just have a few stray bananas. And that's the nice thing too. You can, if you have just a few stray bananas and that leftover grapes, and you're heading out of town or your kids aren't going to eat them, then just dry them. Yeah, and because you can rake them off. If these need to dry a little bit more, you can pull these off and then stick it back in there and dry it some more. Yes, I like to, yes, I think if you did them whole, that they would really take a long time to dry. You could try it.
And you put left side down?
You know, I've done it both ways, and the other day I thought I did them cut side up, and they didn't look like they normally do. So I'm turning them over this time. I'm just going to see. So either way, but usually I do put cut side up. So that's your grapes.
It wouldn't matter if you had a softer banana, like.
That one was pretty soft. That one was black almost. Okay. All right, so that's our grapes. Let's do some pineapple. And now I bought a pineapple that was already peeled and cored. They had them on sale, I think. So whenever, and there's a thing. Sometimes they're $4.99 for this thing. Oh, actually, I think this one was $4.99, and sometimes you go in and they're $2.50. When they're $2.50, buy them. Now, I'm not going to dehydrate the core, but pineapple is one of my favorite things to dehydrate because it's so refreshing to snack on it, and the kids love it. And put it with the banana, like I said, and it tastes, you know, just so fruity and nice and delicious. So I just cut the slices about, what's that? About that thick. But it really is totally up to you. And then I just kind of cut it in half, and then I cut it in fourths. So that's kind of eighths. Y'all are going to need to check that pizza for me. Yes, you can. The question is, can you over dry? Yes. Mostly, the first year I had the dehydrator, I did figs. I sliced fresh figs and dried them. Okay, wait a minute. I'm gonna get this. I'll get it because they actually need to see it. Oop, it's ready. Can you get me a pizza or any kind of pan? I'll slide it on there. Here we go. There's our pizza. Y'all ready for it? There you go. And by the way, these USA pans are so non-stick. Be very careful pulling your pizza. If you cook it on there, be very careful pulling it out of the oven. The first few times we were using it, my daughter did a pizza class, and whatever the pot holder she pulled it out with actually had a little wet spot or something, and it burned her hand. So she pulled it and she went, ah, and like that, and the pizza slid right off the pan, and it stopped right there before it fell on the floor. She was so happy about that. But they're very, very, very non-stick. You might lose your cookies or toss your cookies. So anyway, what were we saying before I was interrupted with pizza? Too dry. Yes, I dried figs, and I just got them so dry they were like rock candy, and I never could even get them hardly to rehydrate. The rice I actually over dried. It said 6 hours, and I put it in there and just left it overnight. I forgot. I didn't think about it. And it's very hard to get it to rehydrate. But most things, it's going to be pretty difficult to get. Like, I've never over dried bananas. I don't know that you could. I've never over dried grapes. I've never over dried pineapple. Got some pretty crunchy, but it softened up. So there are a few things that I think you could over dry. Fruit leathers, if you dry them too long, they're going to break apart and be crunchy and not roll up like a leather. So what I do for that is, like I said, I broke some up and put it in a little pot of water and simmered it and made like a jam out of it, or I powder it and use that to sweeten yogurt. You know, like get plain yogurt or make your own yogurt, and then use that to put in as a sweetener. And remember, it's more sweet because it's now dehydrated, so those flavors are really, really concentrated. All right, well, I'm filling this up with pineapple. So that's pretty much it. I've even dehydrated canned pineapple. Like, why would you want to do that? Well, I just wanted to try it. So, but why would you take it out of a can and dry it unless you're going on a trip and you don't have fresh pineapple? So, anyway. So, yeah, it's just pineapple, especially if you get the one that's just in pineapple juice. And beef jerky, you can get it's a little hard if you over dry it. So those types of things, your beef jerky and your fruit leather, I try to start in the morning so that then after about 5 or 6 hours, I go check it, you know, and I just touch my fruit leather. If it's completely dry on top, then it's ready, okay? And the same with the beef jerky, and because you just don't want to get those too dry. Yes? The advantage of doing rice, brown rice takes conventionally it takes an hour to cook. But this is, I mean, if you ever eat buy a military ready meal or some of these backpacking meals, that's what they are. They're dehydrated. So if you're a camper or a backpacker and you don't want to spend all this time cooking that, that's the advantage, is these are ready to eat just by rehydrating. I don't know if you've tried our refried beans that we sell. They're fully cooked pinto beans that have been dehydrated, and now all you have to do is rehydrate them equal parts beans to water, and they're ready in 2 or 3 minutes. So that's the advantage, and it's very lightweight, you know, so you can toss it in a backpack or camping or whatever. So that's your preparedness type meals, where if you don't have a lot of cooking ability or a lot of heat or a lot of gas or, like I said, camping or whatever, those fully cooked rice that can be ready, brown rice that can be ready in 15, 20 minutes as opposed to an hour, you know. I don't know. I just really started playing with it this week. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my dehydrator on so these things aren't just sitting in here. So just put your lid on the front. It just kind of hangs on and then snaps on there at the bottom. And since these are fruits and vegetables, I'm going to go ahead and turn them up. Well, you have to plug it in to a power source. And it's really not loud, so. The what? The shelf life of dried foods. Most of your books and things will tell you, 6 months or a year or whatever. But like I said, if it does not have oil in it, my Vidalia onions are from 1998. And they've turned darker, but there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing, you remove the moisture, there's nothing that can grow with no oxygen and no water. So these have no water. Yeah. The jerky, because of the fat in the meat, it's going to go rancid. That's what's going to happen there. But as far as spoiling the meat itself, spoiling or having any bacteria, that's not going to happen. But because there's oil there, that's why it'll go rancid, because it's exposed to oxygen. Now, if you did a vacuum sealer or something like that to take all that oxygen out, then that would be different. Yeah. Yes, some meats are safer than others, and some meats are less fatty. Like, I think that's why a lot of people use venison to make their jerky. So.
Just regular fruit or vegetables.
Should, yeah. Yep. Nope. Nope, not at all.
I did a whole bag of mixed vegetables, corn, beans, mixed vegetables, and I dehydrated the whole thing and put it in a quart jar.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so easy.
Yes. So like the frozen mixed vegetables, she just bought a bag of frozen mixed vegetables and dehydrated them. And they're just super easy. I've done okra, where I took just frozen okra and let it thaw and drained the liquid off, and then I coated it with the the roasted red pepper and a little bit of salt, and dried it, and it was so crunchy it tasted like fried okra. It was so, not fried okra. It was just delicious. That's all I can tell you. One of my daughters that really, no, you wouldn't. And I've done fresh as well. But the first time I tried it, I just took frozen okra because I wanted to see what the flavor and how to get that flavor. So, but fresh, you wouldn't have to cook the fresh first at all. Yes. I did thaw the okra out first when I bought it frozen, and she just says she just took the bag of frozen vegetables and put it in the dehydrator. Yeah, just frozen. But the okra, I wanted to coat it with the seasoning, and it wouldn't have stuck to it if it were frozen. So that's why I thawed it. Yep.
You talked a lot about jerky, and for me,
Uh huh.
have you ever reconstituted dehydrated meat from like a package of chili or some other?
His question is, have I ever reconstituted like dehydrated beef jerky or chili or something? I have not, but there are recipes in that dehydration Bible for like, cooking chili and beef stew and drying it. It's a really handy book, especially if you're a prepper or a hippie. you might like that of learning how to do that. And every class, when I get to the dehydration class, I'm like, oh man, I really meant to try that chili and everything. So I did try the rice this week, and I did make that Spanish rice with that little strip of salsa, and it was delicious. And then the rice pudding with just the dried apples and the rice, and just simmered it with, and those apples had cinnamon on them already, so I didn't even have to put the cinnamon in there. So it was really kind of fun, and I'm ready to experiment a little bit more as time goes on, because I don't know if you've looked at the price of dehydrated food. It's very expensive. Now, I will say this. Once you start drying your food, you're going to go, I know why this is so expensive. Because remember, a tablespoon of spinach powder is a cup of fresh spinach. So you're actually buying a whole lot more than it looks like when you buy this little bag of spinach powder or tomato powder or whatever. It's a whole lot more than you think is there, and that's why it's expensive. But you can do it yourself for pennies. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you done ground meats?
I have not. His question is, have I done ground meats for jerky? I have not. I just always use the fresh, and slice my meat. I use a London broil, is a leaner cut of beef, typically doesn't have a lot of fat in it, like say a chuck roast or something, or a different steak. I'm not going to use a ribeye, that's too expensive. But London broil is typically a cheaper cut of meat that's what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as fatty, okay? And lean, there you go. I'm like, what word am I looking for? It's more lean, and so that's what I typically use. But I've seen those where you use the ground beef and you season it up, and then you have that thing that presses it out into strips or extrudes it, and I've never done that, but I'm sure you could if you wanted to.
I've got one of those, and it works well to make like Slim Jim.
Yeah, yes, yeah, makes like a Slim Jim. Yep. Okay, well, let's do our fruit leathers. What? I did a store-bought salsa, and it was kind of chunky, and so it said if your salsa was kind of chunky, to blend it so it would be smoother to make your leather, or you were going to get chunks of tomatoes, just kind of like a mountain sticking up. So I did, and yeah, and I'll show you when I make the fruit leather how I do it. Okay, so let's make a fruit leather. And her question is, how long will the beef jerky last? You will eat it before it, yeah. Because I did a 2-pound London broil, and that's what made that big jar I showed you, the big half-gallon jar. I think it was about a 2-pound London broil, and so that's how much beef jerky it made. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to make beef jerky in a minute. So we're going to make everything. So
When you think about all the stuff you're doing and looking at what you're using, the sodium content is so much lower than what you would buy in the store.
yes, that's a good point.
Heart people, heart issues, stuff.
And that's a good point. The sodium content, if you've looked at processed and even canned fruits and vegetables and processed foods, very, very, very high in sodium. And that is more the issue with the sodium problem with heart patients and blood pressure, because it makes you retain water. In nature, in fruits and vegetables, in nature, the potassium content is double the sodium content. Next time you go to the grocery, start reading labels on some of these processed foods, and you're going to find that the sodium is typically twice the potassium. And that's a real problem. Not to mention the fact that the salt they're using is refined and heat treated so that it doesn't readily absorb moisture. So now that's exactly what's happening in your body, which is why we promote using Redmond's real salt that's not refined at all. So, but you're exactly right. And a lot of reason is when you process something, you cook it, you smash it, you denature it to the fact that to the point that it has no flavor. So now you have to salt it, sugar it, color it so that you will enjoy it. And it's nothing remotely like the real deal. So I did wash these strawberries. When I'm making fruit leathers, I use the stem and all. Doesn't matter. The stem is just a green plant. It's going to be pureed right along with everything else.
I had read that the stem had a lot of nutrients.
And then this is a package of blueberries. And you know what? Heck, let's just throw this in there. It doesn't matter. Just throw it in there. However much your blender will hold. And then the key is going to be, I use about a cup of puree for a fruit leather, for my full tray, And I'll show you how to do that. And I might have to smash these down a little bit. My little muddler. I have an aversion to blenders. And you could put a tiny bit of juice in here if you wanted, like one of those Bolt House smoothies or something, if you wanted to. I don't typically find when berries and things are in season, probably should have started with the pineapple. I don't find that I need any sweetener. I didn't put any sweetener in the ones y'all had today, so if that tells you anything. Remember, if it's sweet to start with, remotely sweet, here it'll be much sweeter. There we go. Come on. Me and blenders don't like each other, so. Exploded. So I usually just taste it, see if it's sweet enough, remotely sweet enough. If it's not, like sometimes if the berries or whatever aren't really, really in season, or maybe they're a little tartar than normal, I think that's fine. Fine, but then I don't eat things super, super sweet. So that's the blender attachment to the Anchus room. So you can see how much I love the Anchus room attachments for dehydration. Again, a good knife, mandolin, slicer, apple peeler, corer, and some kind of slicer shredder apparatus. I do. That's a good question. His question is, do I use organic? Dehydration I'm a little more careful or a little more, having trouble finding my words today, selective to do organic, because remember, everything's concentrating here. Yes, yes, and I forgot to put the veggie wash out here. She said if it wasn't organic, well, even organic, you still need to wash those things, because organic means it was grown organically. And I don't necessarily want that in me either. I want it to come out, not in. Never mind, I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, so yes, we have a product called Veggie Wash that gets all that residue of pesticides and things, anything that could be there. So here's how my son taught me this little trick. I used to use a little spatula and spread, and then you get a bare spot, and I'd spread again. He goes, Mom, just do it this way. So about a cup, a little, you can, I mean, if you get down and you have a tiny bit more, usually I'll go ahead and do a cup and a cup and a cup on each tray, and if I have a little bit more, then I just divvy it up between. It's again, it's not real hard and fast. I can see why you have 4 of them at home. Huh? I can see why you have 4 of them. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I usually try to leave one edge a little thick, so that's my edge that I peel up. Okay, so there's my fruit leather tray. So how easy was that? Yep. And this will take about 5 or 6 hours to dry. So probably it'll sit in here and dry over the weekend. And so it'll be crispy when I get here on Monday. This I'm going to just put in the refrigerator, and then I'll dry it on Monday when I get here with, where I can watch it. Huh? Yes, I do. That's what I'm saying. If this were not sweet enough, I could put a little bit of honey in there. I didn't know if drying the honey. No, drying the honey is fine, and I sweeten it if it's not sweet enough. But just remember, it's going to get sweeter when you dry it. I mean, you tasted the pineapple, the grapes. They're all much sweeter than when they're fresh. And why is that? They're sweeter because you've removed the moisture. All those flavors are now more concentrated. And the same with beef jerky, things like that. Don't want to get it too salty before you dehydrate it, because sometimes I have. If the soy sauce is a little saltier, so now I try to taste my soy sauce or whatever I'm using to see, sometimes you get to the bottom of your bottle and it's more concentrated because you've got a little sediment there, and you use the very end of it and it's a little saltier. So I try to taste it before I completely put all the salt that it calls for there. All right, I'm going to set this aside, and it'll go in the refrigerator, and I'll do the rest of it on Monday. So that was a fruit leather. I mean, like I said, whatever is in your fruit bowl that nobody's going to eat, blend it. Or if you don't have time, or you don't want to just do one fruit leather if you're not drying other things, chop it up, throw it in the freezer. I've taken, and just keep putting it all in a bag. Put the grapes, the pineapple, the bananas, the strawberries, whatever, in a baggie in the freezer, and then open it up one day and puree it and put it in the fruit leathers. Huh? I've not done oranges in my fruit leather. I mean, you could, though. There's nothing, I wouldn't do the peel in there, but you could certainly do. Yes. Yes. Actually, the mandolin, these oranges were kind of soft. So her question was, did I slice the oranges on the mandolin? These were kind of soft. So I ended up slicing them with my ceramic knife. Okay. Have you ever dried lemon? Yes. Actually, her question is, did I ever dry lemon? Yes, 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 yes. When my kids were all at home, we would go more to the farmer's market down south of Atlanta, the real farmer's market. You could buy cases of limes and lemons for like $10, $15 and it was 100 and something limes or lemons, okay? And so we'd come home, and the Anchus room has a citrus juice attachment. So we just stood there and juiced all of them. Then we took a grapefruit spoon. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? I can't believe some people don't know what a grapefruit spoon is. Well, I can't find mine, but it's a spoon that's got serrated edges, serrated tip, right there. And that way you can scoop out your grapefruit. Well, anyway, so we would take one of those and scoop out all the pulp, because there it was just the rind then left. Scoop out all the membrane and the pulp and then dry those and then powder that. And that was my lemon zest, lime zest. Yeah, then you've got it. And then the juice from that case, we froze in the little honey bears. We filled the little honey bears and then froze them. And that way when you wanted fresh lemon juice, I just took out a honey bear and we could pretty much use that lemon up before it would go bad, you know, when you freeze it in smaller amounts. So yeah, there's so much you'll do if you have a dehydrator. I'm just telling you. Yes. Yes, I would dry the skin. Now, when it was just like this here, the orange, I dry the whole thing and I use the whole thing. But this has, you know, some of the taste of the pulp there. But when we juiced it all, that was kind of gone. So for that, to dry just the rind, we scraped a lot of that membrane and a lot of the white pithy part out, and then just dried the skins and then powdered those up, and we had it. In fact, I think I still have a little jar of lime zest. And it's zest, so it's dried zest. Yes? Yeah, so I use the whole orange and I powder it, okay? Which I'll powder some just before we make the smoothie. I'll powder some to let you see what it's like, okay? All right? Okay, so this is our last tray of our 9 trays, but look at what all we've done. You know, so I got a tray of cucumbers, tray of zucchini, tray of apples, a couple of trays of apples. I don't know what else. I've already forgotten. Yeah. So, yep, and the fruit leather. So now I want to show you how to do spinach. And a customer actually shared this tip with me. And I am like, why did I not ever think of that? Normally, I just take it and spread the spinach out. Well, the problem is when it gets dry, it starts flying around the dehydrator. And so you start losing it. And so just this week, this customer said, I took the class and I got the dehydrator and I love doing spinach. She said, what I do is I take the mesh tray off and just put the flex tray down, put my spinach on, okay? And this box, not bag, this package, I did about 2/3 of it, so that's about 1/3. This is 2/3 of this package. That's how much it dried down, okay? So I just spread it out, okay? And then to keep it from flying around, and since I'm going to powder this, I don't worry about destemming it. If you were going to just dry the leaves and then use it, say in a green rice or something like that, then I would probably destem it. Again, you prepare the food however you're going to use it in the end. Because I'm powdering this, I don't care about the stems. They're not, they're not going to affect anything. So now what she told me, she lays this on top, and that holds it in place. And I'm like, ingenious. I'm going to tell my class about that because I'm just getting it in there and it would even, come off and fly around and all of that. So I think I've got every tray full. Oh, I've got one more. I do have one more. How exciting. Oh, I need that for the kale chips. All right, very good. What are y'all eating? Oh, nothing yet. They're working on it. Ooh, that looks good. Pizza and garden harvest bread. All right. So that's spinach. And when it's dry, here's what it's like. Okay, that was 2/3 of that package. Okay, so it was 2 trayfuls, about like that. So here it is. and you can see it is very dry. Okay? It goes down fast, kind of like when you're cooking with it, right? You think you've got a mountain of spinach in there, and you're like, what happened? So there it is. And that's it. Isn't that beautiful? Thought I had an empty jar here. How beautiful is that? What do I do with this? Smoothie. My daughter came up with this great thing. You know, how are you going to get your toddlers to eat greens? And so she called it a Shrek smoothie. That was when Shrek was really big. You could call it Hulk or superhero, whatever. And I'm going to make you a smoothie in just a few minutes. And tablespoon in the smoothie, that is like a cup of fresh spinach.
Would you ever add the powder or the dried spinach or even zucchini to a fruit leather?
You could. That's what I was saying. I would have tossed some fresh greens or even the dry in that fruit when we were pureeing our vegetables. Absolutely. Yeah. The fruit leather is yours. Make it however you want. And if you do green drinks, make it green. Yeah, whatever. So it's super, super easy. All right. We've talked about beef jerky and we've talked about kale chips. So let's do it. Let's see if my roast is thawed out enough to cut it. Yeah. That's what I'm going to explain. So I use, I'm going to use that in just a minute. I use a London broil, like I said. Hang on, I'm going to clear some of this away right here. I like a London broil because it is a leaner, cheaper cut of meat than some of your others out there. And what I like to do is when I buy it, I stick it in the freezer. And then when it's partially frozen, because it freezes from the outside in, so that surface is going to be, wow, what did I do here? Okay, well, that's going to be interesting. So the outside freezes, and it makes it very easy to slice. But for class, if I stuck it in the freezer before class, it wouldn't be ready. So it's usually about 5 or 6 hours that I let it just sit in the freezer, and then that outside gets frozen, and then it makes it easier to slice thin. I used to do it this way, where I'd freeze it and take it out and let it be partially frozen this way. But my son said, Mom, do you realize, oh, I know why this is, this is a marinated meat. This has the coffee rub on it. I thought it was the plain London broil that I put in there. Oh, well, it's okay. So my son pointed out to me that when you freeze the roast and then thaw it to slice it, it thaws from the outside in. So your surface is thawed, so it makes it harder to slice. So it's easier if you get the roast, freeze it, take it out before it's completely frozen, and slice it. But either way it works, but it is a little easier to slice that way because then the surface is nice and frozen and not so soft. So I'm going to slice this. This is the coffee rub. That'll be good too, though, I think. I wondered why it was like folded in half. So that's about how thin I cut mine. Okay? About a quarter, yeah. And of course, if you have a food slicer, see, it didn't thaw quite as much as I wanted it to, so it's a little frozen. But you get the idea. And I'm actually not going to slice much more because it's still kind of frozen, and this is actually a coffee rub roast that I was going to make or something else. All right. I'm sorry, what? No, I usually, yeah, I mean, you cut across the grain. Yeah, so, all right, so now we're just going to make our little beef jerky marinade here. And I find that a single recipe of this marinade will do about a pound or so of meat. If you get a big 2-pounder, then you're going to probably want to double it, okay? And then here's how I do it. I just take a measuring cup and I start measuring my ingredients. So I'm using the cocoa aminos, which is made of coconut nectar instead of soy. So I'm just going to use a 1/4 cup here. And then just measure the rest of my ingredients. And y'all are eating pizza. How is it? Yeah, do you like the zucchini there? Yeah. Little squeeze of honey, which I can't believe I'm even measuring that. I don't usually even measure it. And this is where these little spatulas come in very handy when you're scraping something out of the little mini measurers. Because there's not much else that will fit in there. Okay. And then I seldom have mustard powder around, so I usually always use just mustard. And then I'm only going to use a teaspoon of garlic salt, and this is our Redmond garlic salt. I'm only going to use a teaspoon, mix it up, and taste it. I think it can use the 2nd teaspoon because this is not quite as salty as your soy-based soy sauces. Yes, I have. Yes, and I don't remember. I don't think it is as salty as your soy. So you just mix all your ingredients. I forgot this was, I made a big batch the other day, so it was more in here, so I'm just going to put it in here. All right, so now all I do is just take my meat and dip it in. And I'm just going to coat it with this marinade. And then I let this, I'll refrigerate it and let it meld overnight, marinate overnight. And then I just take the strips and lay it out, single layer, in my dehydrator. Okay? So beef jerky takes, depending on how thick, and some of them might get a little thicker than others, and it'll just take a little longer to dry, but not usually so long that it makes the others get too dry. It's really not that critical, except unless you don't want to go overnight. So that's why I typically do my beef jerky, my fruit leathers, things that have a little more critical time slot. I'll do them in the mornings so that I can watch them, check them during the day. And then my things like apples, grapes, you can do those in the morning because they're probably going to take 24. Grapes are going to take probably 48 hours. So you'll get a routine. You'll figure it out. And there's not a hard and fast rule to it, because how long is an apple going to take to dry? Well, it's going to depend on how thick you cut it, how juicy, was the apple, was it dry or was it, tart. I also don't, you can see I don't dip my fruits and things in, like fruit fresh or anything like that, or even worry about cutting them in putting them in lemon juice. Now, once I get it all, I just go ahead and pour the rest of this. Now, I would have done more beef jerky than this. Just going to pour the rest of that marinade over. But I don't worry about using the fruit fresh or lemon juice or anything like that. If you were doing a lot of apples and it was going to take you a long time to get them on, then maybe I would drop them in lemon water. But typically I don't. And the tartar the apple, like a Granny Smith, I find that it does not turn dark as, say, a Rome apple or a or a Red Delicious or something like that. Ones that aren't as tart. But I also find that the Excalibur dries so quickly that most of the time there's very little browning with it because it dries so quickly. And one thing I do, like while I'm slicing, is once I put that first tray in, I typically turn on the dehydrator. Even though I'm opening the door and putting in the next one, that way it's drying as soon as it gets in there, instead of like today, just leaving it back there and keeping on loading it up. So this is going to go in the refrigerator and probably stay there till Monday, and then Monday I'll come in and just spread it out just like this on a dehydrator tray, single layer, and it'll dry for 5 or 6 hours. And with beef jerky, it needs to dry at about 155 degrees. But all of that is in the drying manual that comes with the Excalibur, and it's on the top of the Excalibur. That little blue square shows you, here's for living foods, here's yogurt, here's bread making, here's beef jerky, has to go all the way up to 155 because it is meat and it needs to dry quickly. All right? People are funny. They're like, you mean I just ate raw meat? Yeah, kind of. So anyway. You just got to dry those higher. And I use beef because beef is a lot safer than turkey and chicken, but I know there's turkey jerkies and things out there. The main thing with your meat is follow your directions and follow your drying times and temperatures and everything. I don't know. I've not ever done beef. I've not ever done turkey or chicken. I would think. I don't know. I would think not either, but I don't know. You've done it?
Yeah, the other thing about it is the marinade, it's like
Right, so it's gonna, yeah, yep.
but a lot of it's like salt content.
Right, so that's gonna preserve it. I would think you wouldn't want to do cooked because it's, well, I don't know. I would follow your directions, and yeah, what you're saying is the salt and the marinate's gonna preserve it somewhat.
So I guess what I'm saying is like poultry doesn't stand up to the seasoning as much as beef does. So you have to be careful about your marinade over like too much.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
It's just like not
Overpowering it flavor-wise? Yes, because it is so mild in flavor, which is one reason I love like ground turkey. I make my breakfast sausage out of that because it's so mild. It really picks up the sage and the fennel seed and the things that I'm flavoring with. Beef is going to mask those flavors. I see what you're saying, yes, but I would imagine that those marinades do act, and the salt, as somewhat a preservative. But I've never done, to be honest with you, I've never done turkey or chicken jerky, so I would be careful and follow the instructions. Yeah. Hang on. I can't hear you. Say what?
They were already cooked. Yeah, so like the pre-cooked sausages
Yes.
that I dehydrated and took to 8.
Oh, okay.
We lived at a Pouillet.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what he's saying, you took the fully cooked, like Hillshire Farms or whatever. Okay. Well, those are so full of preservatives, ain't gonna kill you. So, well, it's gonna kill you, but not, yeah. So anyway, yes, that makes sense there. But yes, I can see that. Yes, that would be perfectly safe. What was your question, hon? Oh, the sausage that we use today. That is, and I have a feeling it's because we use it in just about every class because we want to give you a little protein with all the carbohydrates that we're giving you. So that was Publix Greenwise chicken sausage, and it's a mild Italian. They do have a hot Italian. but they have a mild Italian. And the store right up here, he says, I keep going in there for class, and they're always out. And I'm like, why, y'all having trouble getting this? He goes, no, we're just having trouble keeping it in. He said, we used to hardly ever sell it, and now we sell it all the time. And I'm like, might be either me buying it for every class or everybody likes it. It's very delicious. Of course, we made it even better. I don't see the smoker anymore, but with our Cameron stovetop smoker, smokes right on your stovetop, so easy to use, completely self-contained, stainless steel. You put the smoking chips in the bottom, and they're just wood chips, finely shaved. They're not chemical laden or flavored or seasoned or anything. And I think I have one right here. Hang on, I'll show you. Yep. Here's my Cameron, the Cameron stovetop smoker. Guys, close your ears for a minute. This is a great Father's Day present. If you don't know what to get the person that has everything, if they like smoked everything. So here's what it looks like, and they have all kinds of chips. I think I have some up here. There's all different flavors, pecan, hickory, mesquite, and you just use like a tablespoon of the chips right here in the bottom. Put your drip pan in, put your rack, and then start putting your chicken, your salmon, your sausage. You can do nuts. You can smoke cheese in a dish. You just put it in a glass heat-safe dish and put it in there. You can smoke it. It's amazing. So amazing. And I've done kebabs. I think in our class next week, we're going to do the tangy tangerine chicken kebabs. We're going to smoke them in the smoker instead of on the grill. And we'll just use a mild wood like alder so it doesn't overpower the flavor of the marinade. So that's it. So then all you do is you slide the top on. You leave about a little crack here. Put it on your stovetop on high, and in about a minute to a minute and a half, you'll see the first little whiff of smoke come out. Just shut it down, turn it down to kind of medium high, and then cook it however long. Those sausage we cook about 20 minutes. They're not cooked at all. They are raw, fresh sausage. So we love them. I think they're good just cooked like they are, but smoking them takes them over the top and just gives it a very, very, very delicious flavor. And then if you have leftover, and the roasted red pepper on chicken, marinate it just like I did today with the zucchini, powder it so it really coats the chicken nicely, and then smoke the chicken there. Oh my goodness, it is so, so delicious. All right, I don't know what time it is. What time? I meant to see, what time is this class supposed to be over? Oh, wow, okay, we're so good, okay. But really, that is really a great gift. I've given it as wedding gifts, at couple showers, and it's $49.95. I mean, it's just a great, and we use ours a lot. All right, I think we're down to kale chips. We've done the spinach powder, and now we'll do the kale chips. The kale chips actually came from the lady that did the raw food class years ago that I told you about. And some of the recipes in the back are her recipes, like the berry yummy breakfast bars, the granola, and the oatmeal cookies. These are all the flax crackers, the stuffed mushrooms. These are all raw food recipes that they use the dehydrator on a very low heat to kind of bake or dehydrate the crackers and the cookies and things like that. But the kale chips I absolutely love, and that's probably one of my favorites from the class. So all we're going to do, Teresa, would you go in the kitchen and see if they have another blender out there? I thought I had 3 out here, and I know I've got one there, one here. It's a soft red wheat. Yes, it's organic, Georgia grown. So here's my kale. Now, this recipe will do 1 big bag of kale if you buy it like that already destemmed. But what I do for the kale, even that bag, there's these big stemmy parts, I go through and peel that off. So you can see, and just go through and take all that off. So, I mean, if a few here and there, it's not going to hurt it, but it's a little tough. So I just make sure it's all off, and I did this already. So this is half of a bag. So what I'm going to do is half the recipe, okay? Because it does make a lot. And because this has oil, it has tahini butter, which I don't know if you know what tahini butter is. We carry this brand. It is sesame seeds, just ground into a butter. I'll tell you what, just dump that in a jar and bring me that one back. She might have put it somewhere strange. Did you check back there? Yeah, I'm going to make a smoothie in that one. But if you could, okay, all right. Just, Ah, found it. Yeah. You can do, it's your recipe. It's going to taste different. Coconut butter is going to have a little different taste. It does call for almond butter. I do not use almond butter because I have a granddaughter that has a tree nut allergy, and so many people are allergic to nuts that I just, tree nuts especially, or peanuts, whatever, I just don't use it so that it's fine. So I just use all tahini butter, okay? So because I'm halving the recipe now, I'm just going to use 1/3 cup of the tahini butter. So I just put all my ingredients in the blender. I like this brand of tahini butter. I actually bought another brand when we couldn't get this during all the COVID crazy. And it was very bitter. So I actually do like this brand. We do. Mm-hmm. It is. It just, yes. Mm-hmm. I think anyway. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of oil there. Tahini is a sesame seed butter. Okay? Once again. And we do carry it. It's hard to get sometimes, so. Yeah, you can use it. Yes, it's just, and some of them are. They're very, very bitter. Yeah. Now, I always forget the parsley, and so I've just had to make them without it, and I don't notice a big difference without the parsley, so I just don't use parsley. That was my green onion. So now here's my lemon. And I'm halving the recipe, so I'm just using half of what it calls for. And I tried something yesterday when I was, or 3 days ago when I was making this. It calls for apple cider vinegar. And I decided to use the roasted garlic vinegar. So that's what, the ones you had the roasted garlic vinegar. I've had it with the apple cider, and it's great. But I was like, well, this should make it even better. So this is our infused roasted garlic vinegar. And here's where these little mini measures really come in handy when you're measuring tablespoons of things like liquid and nut butters. Okay. And then I need a little sea salt. The garlic. No, I don't. So if I were making the full recipe, I just would use 2/3 a cup of the tahini. And I don't worry about the 2 tablespoons. I don't know what that's all about. That's too complicated for me. I'm just like, no, just heap up the 1/3 measure a little bit. You know what? Recipes are just suggestions, so just do it. Okay, and it's really interesting mixture, and it's actually quite tasty. So I let it blend a little longer so that those onions get chopped up. Oh, I forgot the half a cup of water. I knew it was a little pastier than, or the quarter cup, because I'm halving it. I don't think I did. No. There you go. Thank you. That's why I'm like, okay, this is looking like paste. I was thinking I had because I was thinking of the jerky. So yeah, that Nama's shoyu is a naturally brewed soy sauce, a naturally fermented, and you can buy it Publix or wherever. But I thought I really want to get away from soy, even though that's a fermented soy and probably fine. But so I just use the coconut aminos. That's funny. I was thinking I had already done it because I did the beef jerky. So it is getting that time of class. Okay, let's go down and make sure I got everything. Tahini, not using the almond butter. The vinegar, water, not using the parsley. The soy, the green onions, the garlic. I'd use the roasted garlic, vinegar, lemon, and salt. Okay, now it should look normal. There we go. Okay, this is a dish, or this is a product that you do not want to dry inside, and you don't want to put it in there with all those fruits and vegetables. It stinks. I'm just going to tell you. The first time I made it, all my employees were like, "What?" And most of the time when I'm in here, they're like, "Oh man, it smells so good. What are you cooking?" That time they were like, that and sauerkraut. They're always like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Sorry, it's kale chips," and it's like, woo. So I start them outside typically, so I won't put them in the dehydrator now. I'll start them outside after y'all leave. And then usually once they get that first smell kind of done, it's okay to bring it in. No, I'm sorry. I will put them in the dehydrator, put the dehydrator outside. Sorry, that was kind of not very clear. It's a wonder y'all are even figuring out anything I'm doing today. It's a cocoa amino. It's made from coconut. It's a coconut nectar aminos. So, and there is a, what's the Bragg's amino, liquid aminos, which you can do that too. It's the same flavor kind of as soy. So you can see it's still very pasty. And again, the hardest part of this whole making here is getting all this kale coated. You don't just mix it. You really want to just dig into it with your hands and make sure each piece is nice and coated. That's not as complicated as I'm making it sound, but you don't want to just toss it. You want to really coat it, or that kale that you ate didn't have any flavor to it. It tasted like kale. I'm not a kale fan. I know it's real popular, but I'm not a kale fan. I like spinach, but I don't care for kale. All right, so now we just dig in there with your hands. And I'm just kind of rubbing it, kind of like you're hand washing something. And just make sure you get down on the bottom and get that flipped up. And sometimes the kale is a little limper than others. I don't know, or not as tough. Different seasons, it feels different. And it's okay. The first time I made it, and if you don't have quite as much kale and it's a little goopier, it's okay. Just goop it on there. First time I made it, it was like goopy. And I just piled it on there, and then you just break it apart because it all dries kind of together. So that's looking pretty good. You just want to make sure it's all coated. And this mixture is actually very tasty. Whoops, little runaway there. And I probably need 2 trays for this, so I'm going to have to get another tray. So I'll just go ahead and spread it out on here though. So that's about how I spread it out. And it will dry like stuck together, but there's no way that you want to stand there and do each leaf. No, just pile it on. If you see any that's not quite coated, go ahead and give it a little rub. And it'll dry kind of stuck together, but then you just break it apart into chunks to eat it. Okay. I think that's about as thick as I want to pile this, so I'll get another tray after class and get this on it. So what I mean by starting it outside is I would put this in the dehydrator. Because it's so smelly, I put it outside and turn the dehydrator on, put it outside for a little while, and once that first oomph of smell is over, it's then fine to bring it in. And it'll take, because this is so wet, even though this is leafy, unlike the spinach that'll dry in a couple of hours, just dry like that, this is wet and it's going to take a while for this to dry. So usually overnight. And then I check, make sure if you have a piled up area that it's all dry, because sometimes it'll feel all dry here, and then all of a sudden when I go to take it off the tray, it's like, oop, there's a spot that's a little wet, that maybe it was just piled higher, than something else. But that's about as thick as I like to make it. Okay? Say it again. I've never done spinach chips, but I guess you could. The kale is a little tougher, so it holds up a little better than I think spinach would, but hey, try it. Sometime when you're making kale chips, put a little spinach in there and see what it, Have I ever tried broccoli or cauliflower? No, I haven't. I always just get those fresh, and we used to grow it, so I've never tried that. There's some things I don't, and those, but now you've got me really wanting to dry the mixed vegetables and do it. I usually either get it fresh. Oh, I think so. It's in the same family, and it's the same stinky family. Yeah. I remember years ago when my kids were really young. I was born and raised in Savannah. And I don't know if you've ever been to Savannah, but as you head into Savannah, there's a paper mill right on the outskirts of town, and that's what greets you to Savannah. They really should have thought about that before then. So our garden was coming in, and we had just blanched, it was before dehydration, blanched and frozen all of this broccoli. It's stinky, right? It's very sulfury and it's kind of smelly. So we had been doing that and had put all that up the day before we left. And as we're driving down and we get to Savannah, my kids were like, one of them said, "Oh, this stinks. It smells like broccoli." I was like, ooh, that doesn't say much. But anyway, it is kind of a very sulfury smell. But anyway, so there you have it. So that will go in the dehydrator, turned on, outside for a little while, and then we'll bring it in before I leave, and it'll be ready. So anyway, all right, did we do it? I think we did. Y'all had the pizza? Did you like the pizza? How about the Garden Harvest bread? That is one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite breads. Yes, and you can make it with fresh or, as you see, with the dehydrated. So let's make our Shrek smoothie, and we'll be out of here. That's why I didn't want to use this for we could have put it right on here. That little bit of spinach would have been just fine for the kale, but I didn't want to because I'm going to put spinach powder in my Shrek smoothie, and that's already there. So, hey. All right, let me get the ingredients for that. I know the recipe calls for orange juice, but again, it's your smoothie. You do whatever you want. And I find that I tried this one time, and it's tangerine juice. Tangerine juice is a little sweeter than orange juice, so I really like the tangerine juice. So that's what I'm going to use today. And just so you know, I have actually made this smoothie with dehydrated pineapple and dehydrated bananas, and then used ice for the frozen part. But I prefer to use frozen bananas and frozen pineapple because it makes it icy and slushy and nice. So, but I have done it with the dried banana and pineapple. All right. So I'm going to kind of use this recipe because when I don't, I overfill the blender and it goes everywhere. So we're going to be good today. And I think it'll hold 3. See, there's where I get in trouble. But this is what my daughter came up with for her kids to make them a smoothie, and she called it a Shrek smoothie. So it's got some spinach powder in there, but I'm going to do a tablespoon per recipe. And remember, that's like a cup of spinach. So that's what you're giving your kids. I do find that the spinach does not absorb the moisture as much as, say, the cucumbers did. That's why the spinach had been marinated, had been dehydrated since like Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, and I just bagged it, and it doesn't seem to get that moisture like the cucumbers did. So there's half a banana, half a banana, half a banana. Oh yeah, I think this will even do another one. I'm not going to push it. And then I taste it. If it's not sweet enough, I'll do a little bit of honey in there, just a squeeze of honey. But with the tangerine juice, I find that it's typically sweet enough. Wash my hands. I'm sorry, question? I found it at Publix. Yeah. That looks like it could use a little more juice. Hush. Just a little. You notice I always hold it onto it like it's going to fly off of there because I just don't trust blenders. And it's, yeah. And what happened, it was a defective blender that I was using, and I didn't know it was defective. And while it was blending, and it was one of the mini blenders with the blades on the bottom, you turn it upside down. And so while it was blending, it was unscrewing the cap. And so when I lifted it off, it went whoosh, right on TV. And they still aired the show. I thought surely they would cut it and edit it. Nope. All right. How beautiful is that? Isn't that pretty? It's almost like sherbet. In fact, y'all might want to get a spoon and kind of dip it more. You know what I'm saying? I'll taste it. Ooh. Oh, it might pour. I'll see if it needs honey. I think it's perfect. See, that's the tangerine juice. It's a little sweeter. Oh my gosh, that is so good. It's a little green. I can taste that. Kind of back there. I'm going to put, nope, I'm just going to leave it. It's a little green. It's a little green, but it's good. It had a bunch of spinach in there. There we go. All right. Any questions? Are y'all ready to dehydrate? Yeah? If you just, this tastes a little spinachy to me, so I wasn't thinking about all that residue spinach that was down in there. I probably didn't need as much. But yeah, you can hide it. Another thing is put it in the fruit leathers. I used to make for my grandkids, they called it sherbet. Well, they call me Gum Gum, and Anyway, they would call it sherbet, and I would just do like a bag of frozen mixed berries, a little bit of like the Bolt House smoothie juices, pure juices, just to give it some liquid, and then I put a handful of salad greens in there. And they never knew it was there because it was a dark berry. Like if you wanted to make that with a darker berries and darker juice, then you could put the spinach in there and they wouldn't see it at all, and they wouldn't taste it. So, yeah. Yeah, pomegranate, some stronger flavor juice. But my daughter they loved pineapple and banana and orange juice. So she just decided to call it a Shrek smoothie. So that was cool. Or Hulk, I think, was also there for a while. Do y'all think you can dehydrate now? Yeah, it's so easy. I mean, it really, sometimes I get to the end of the class, I'm like, did y'all really learn anything? Chop it, put it in the tray, dehydrate it. So any questions? Yeah? Watery. Mm-hmm.
So it's not good to like fry.
Right.
If you dehydrate it, is that fry?
Okay, her question is dehydrating it to fry, say like zucchini or squash. Try some. I mean, just fill a tray and try it. I never tried frying it because I don't typically fry the zucchini. The biggest way I use zucchini is just in bread and muffins and the pepperoni. But I think that it would. You just rehydrate it and then pat it dry, just because it rehydrates back up almost just like you. Yes. Mm-hmm. I think you could. Yes. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so the first time I tried it, I bought frozen, already chopped yogurt. It's getting late in the day. Already sliced okra. But then when I did the fresh, my neighbor gave me some fresh. I sliced it. Yeah, just like you would fried okra. Yeah. So, and then I just tossed it with that roasted red pepper, the same thing I used on the zucchini. I also, another time I did we have a Tex-Mex seasoning out there by Salt Sisters that already has the salt and everything on it. I did that, and it was really, really good too. So, and just toss it on there, and you know, okra's kind of wet and gummy anyway, so it'll stick to it really nicely, and then I just spread it out. Yeah, I didn't blanch the fresh. Now, I'm sure the frozen was probably already blanched, but, and the only reason I thawed it out was so the seasoning would stick to it. But yeah, yep. And there's so many more things in the dehydrator Bible. I keep smelling something burning. Is there something cooking or is everything out? Okay, thank you. I just like, what did I forget? Yes. The fruits, I honestly, I store them like this if it's something that we're eating out of, you know, and like the apples, if I'm going to set these so the kids will come and get those and eat, and the pineapple and that. If it's fall and I've done tons of apples, I will bag them in Ziploc bags. And here's my fruit bucket, and I just throw it in here. Let's see what goodies I have. Oh, here's apple powder. Here's dried apples. Oh, there's pinto beans. I don't know how they got in there. And there's grapes. So see, I'll just put it in here. In the what? The same. Just put it in a Ziploc bag. Yeah. But like I said, I'll do it in jars. When the kids were home, I would do it in jars so that they would see them, you know. But it's funny, after the last class I did, I had a bunch of fruit leathers and beef jerky, and some of my kids were over, adult kids, to play games and stuff, and they found them sitting there in a Ziploc bag, and they sat there and ate them while we played games. So, but yeah, either way, doesn't really matter. However is the best way. I have a basket at home that I'll put the Ziploc baggies in. So, yeah. I haven't. I'm not a big beet fan. So. But you know what, though? I have had beet smoothies and things like that, you know, cooked beets and then put them in a smoothie, and that was delicious. So I'm thinking, why couldn't you cook them, slice them, dry them, powder them, and then throw a little bit of the beet powder in? I think you could do that. Yes, you could. Absolutely. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. The beet powder is nice to add to pasta. Also, your red velvet cake, it used to have beets in it, was what made it red. And now, of course, it's just red dye. So the traditional old red velvet cake has beet powder. Yeah. Or actually smushed pureed beets, not beet powder. Yeah. I would try it both ways at first. Yeah, because if you want it raw, like in a smoothie, I'd probably slice it really thin or even grate it. If you're going to powder, it doesn't matter what it looks like. So that's why if I'm going to powder something, I'll run it through my grater. Just put it on there. It doesn't matter. I mean, except for spinach, you just put that on there whole. But if I'm going to powder, I don't really care that much. Now, tomatoes be next to impossible to grate a tomato. So we do use the mandolin slicer for that. And I'm just telling you, this mandolin slicer is amazing. Yeah. Brad is not a huge fan of pasta, so I don't make a lot of pasta. My daughters do, but pasta with freshly milled flour is amazing. Particularly, kamut is the grain you want for pasta. And when I started dehydrating, I did make pasta and put tomato powder in there, spinach powder in there. Just want to remember, don't get heavy-handed. Remember that tablespoon of spinach powder is like a cup of spinach, and it's dehydrated, so it's going to absorb some of the moisture. So you just got to you don't need a lot. A little goes a long way. But I have made spinach pasta and I have made tomato pasta, but it's been a long time. It was when I first started, and that's what Brad says. I mean, he's not a big pasta fan. I love fresh pasta. There's no comparison. Any other questions? Yep. Yes, yes. Her question is, could you just, if you were going to powder them, could you just puree them and pour them out like a leather? Yes. Probably take more room that way because, 2 or 3 tomatoes going to, take up a lot of leather space. So, because tomatoes, if you slice them thin enough, you can kind of overlap them a little bit because you're going to dry them for 48 hours anyway. You could cook them down, whatever you want. But I'm telling you, the easiest thing, slice them, put them in there, powder them, take out a couple of tablespoons of that powder. Because remember, a quart jar holds the equivalent of 100 tomatoes powdered. So a tablespoon is pretty concentrated. And then I would just put water until it was the thickness that I wanted it. Or if you ever have a recipe that calls for tomato paste, then you just hydrate, add water till it's pasty. Or if you have a soup that's too thin and you're like, oh, I wish I had some tomato paste, add a tablespoon of tomato powder. It will suck up some of that moisture, or depending on how big a pot of soup it is. I'm telling you, just start dehydrating and you will fall in love with it. There's just so many things that you can do. And there's so many things more I could have shown you, but I feel like it's, once you get the basic concept, just remember the 2900 or 2600, what is 2900, we have 6 of them and they're 219. We do have the 3900 if you would rather have the longer warranty. It's 10 years on the 3900. I think it's 7 on the 2900. So the ones we have out on the shelf are the 2900. They're 219. After those are sold, we can't get those anymore. As far as I can tell, the weight's the same, everything's the same. So yeah, because I read all the specs and I'm like, what's the difference? And I don't know. So that's it. So there you have it. But we do have the other ones. We just hadn't put them out on the shelf. So, all right? So if you want those, we have 14 of those. So take all you want. $279. $279. No. It looks exactly the same. Doesn't have the glass window, doesn't have the timer. It's exactly the same as this one. Just it's got a 10-year warranty. All right? So thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the dehydration class, and I hope you will join us. We have some great classes coming up. I'll tell you what they are in June. Next week, We have the Olivelli class, grilling and chilling. Ashley and I will be teaching that. I'm real excited about the menu for that night. I did the watermelon salad. Oh my goodness, everybody at church was like, what is this? It was so delicious. So we'll have that. Have getting started, if you're ready to get started with bread making, we have that on June 19th. And then jams and jelly and basic canning on Thursday, June 24th. And then our next classes will be in mid-July because Brad and I will be leaving for Tanzania for 2 weeks. So anyway, thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the class, and I hope you will join us again for another class. See ya. Bye.